Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. With a strike at Fiat Chrysler having been averted, UAW workers will soon be voting on that second tentative agreement. UAW leaders say significant gains were made in the second round of bargaining. The union's bargaining committee voted to send the proposed contract to local UAW leaders and their Chrysler Council. The UAW Chrysler Council will meet Friday in Detroit to review and vote on the tentative agreement. If they approve, the UAW plans to make details of the new agreement public immediately. Then it still must be ratified by rank-and-file UAW workers at Fiat Chrysler. UAW President Dennis Williams says leadership heard the members and went back to the table at Fiat Chrysler to strengthen the new labor agreement. Williams says he believes this new tentative agreement addresses UAW members' principal concerns about their jobs and their futures. U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders and Representative Mark Pocan this week introduced the Workplace Democracy Act. Senator Sanders says it would greatly strengthen the rights of American workers to join unions.
This legislation will make it easier for workers to join unions and collectively bargain for higher wages and stronger benefits. Under this legislation, when a majority of workers in a bargaining unit sign valid authorization cards to join a union, they will have a union. End of discussion.
United Food and Commercial Workers President Mark Perrone says talk at the White House Worker Voice Summit won't be enough. Perrone says action must be taken. Action, he says, to stop, quote, irresponsible employers that cut wages and benefits, misclassify workers as independent contractors or hire temporary workers to avoid responsibilities as an employer, and punish those who speak out and try to better their lives, end quote. American Federation of Teachers President Randy Weingarten says Hillary Clinton's opposition to the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade agreement has proven again that she is a champion for working people. The AFT endorsed Clinton for president in July. Weingarten says the TPP threatens to harm workers and the environment. While most Americans still struggle to get ahead, Weingarten says, trade agreements like the TPP only make their situation worse.
Workers Independent News is brought to you with support from union-owned, union-represented Bank of Labor. Bank of Labor has provided trust and fiduciary services to labor organizations for nearly a century. Online at bankoflabor.com.
Workers Independent News made possible in part through underwriting support from the OPEIU, the Office and Professional Employees International Union, and from the National Association of Letter Carriers. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
This town gonna be here long after I'm gone. East side, west side, people don't surrender. They've been down, but they still rise on. Oh, and this time is my time. All right, love or hate, it don't matter. 'Cause I'm gonna stand and fight. This time is my time. She got her ups and downs, but love or hate, it don't matter. 'Cause this is my time.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here today on the big program. Lots of things to get to, lots to talk about on this rainy Friday here in Harrisburg. And I guess, you know, with the chaos, with the insanity that has taken place this week, rain on a Friday is the perfect end to the calamity that happened here in Harrisburg and in D.C. The chaos, let the chaos reign. not good for the country. Interesting to watch, easy to sit in this chair. Kind of takes me back to my grade school days. Growing up, going to Catholic school where they taught you about that book there that said, the people who want to beat you with the book but never seem to read it. The whole house divided thing. Not just once, but twice, actually, if I remember right. Once in Mark and once in Matthew, talking about a house divided cannot stand. A kingdom divided cannot stand. A house divided? No. Not. And I think rational thought, yeah. Not very difficult to figure out in my world. Not very difficult at all when you look at just and I guess what this tells me, and this goes back to what I've been saying for the longest time. You cannot continue to vote for people who tell you that we don't believe in government. You can't have people going, well, we're gonna shake things up in Washington. We're gonna change Washington. Yeah, you've done that. Congratulations for the worst. Things are much worse. And you go, and good, that's what they want. I was reading an article today, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, the guy who was running to be Speaker of the House, this is the kind of the big thing, and there's a whole bunch of whirlwind stuff going around McCarthy in his exit, possibly a sex scandal, who knows? Wouldn't doubt it. Maybe with another member of Congress. Oh, wouldn't that be very conservative of them? See, I think that should get them right in. Conservative credentials, bang, sex affair, and deny it, you're in, like Flint. But here's the thing. They voted for exactly what they want. I mean, this guy has to know he doesn't stand a chance with the Freedom Caucus, which might as well be the Scorched Earth Caucus, might as well be the Mad Max Caucus. I mean, you can come up with a whole bunch of bizarre ways of putting it, but these are people who do not believe that we should be doing anything, that we should be shutting down the government over Planned Parenthood or whatever else they decide at that moment. And this is the problem where you have so much power in the House because, the passions and the whims and the insanity that was supposed to be. I mean, we're getting in our House of Representatives exactly what the founders wanted. The passions of the crazy people to, go stir up trouble. And the Senate is supposed to be where you go, no, you don't want to do that. Calm down. Come on this way, kid. We'll bring you along. We'll educate you a little bit. We're going to help you in this governance thing. Problem is these are folks who don't care about governance. And this is what happens when you have this whole ideology and the moneyed interest pushing this stuff. We can point and go, oh, it's just chaos and they're all bad. No, this is designed. This is the ALEC playbook. If you can weaken government, if you can, as Grover Norquist said, make it small enough and we drown it in the bathtub, then you don't have anyone to worry about. If you've got a government that's fighting each other, if you've got a political system that's eating its own, if you've got a political system that is dysfunctional and in every way, shape, or form, the things that used to be yawn votes, the things that used to be no-brainers, the things that used to be just common sense because we need to do it, not anymore. Not even close anymore. And that's because you've gotten a segment of these really, really far out. It's one of those things where you can't come up with words strong enough. When you look at these people that we have who are really their goal, and they ran out, we're going to change Washington. We're going to change Harrisburg. And they have for the much worse. Look, we can't get a budget done. In what used to be, we've got bills to pay. We need to raise revenue. It used to be common. You've got an entire political party who's saying their ideology and their mantra for years has been no new taxes, no taxes, no taxes. Which again, I got to be honest, I go back to H.W. Bush. And I think it was that moment in time where the Republican Party said, off the rails. Because he looked at the books, he goes, there's just no way we can cut enough to get to this. There's just no way. We've cut taxes too far. to be able to afford what we need. So he went back on that whole read my lips thing. Cost him in 92. And I think what that did to the parties, never again. And that out come the pledges and out come all of this insanity that Pennsylvania, where I live here in Pennsylvania, next year they're saying we've got a $2 billion budget hole. And yet you've got a Republican Party saying we're not going to responsibly tax the drillers. Not going to do it. Not going to do it. And you've got, it's just mind-blowing to me that I was watching the Twitter of my state rep and a bunch of other state reps here in Pennsylvania. And, you know, it was, they were happy and thrilled, and we cut back on those taxes, and we gave Wolf a defeat. And you should have just read some of this stuff. It was really crazy. It was really the whole, you know, my team against your team. And I'm going, but at the end of the day, we're more than 100 days beyond you doing your job and getting a budget done. And you're going to have cheerleading contests and this nonsense. And it just kind of made me go, you know, this is what we, the voters, have done to ourselves. This is what we've done. And we've done it not just by ourselves, but we've done it because the moneyed interests want it. So yesterday, when McCarthy exits the race for speaker, Freedom Works, the head guy of the DC Freedom Works, comes out and said, this is a huge win for conservatives who want to see real change in Washington, not some go along, get along ways of Washington. No. We go along, get along with nothing getting done at all. We're going to change that and make sure nothing gets done. That's really what he's saying. And that's one of there were a bunch of quotes today I got to get to, but that's one of them that grabbed me and go, really? Really? Is this where we're going on this? Now, let me ask you, because this is one of those questions where you throw out that you go, at some point, does not the Republican Party completely implode? And some have argued, and I've had a couple of conversations today, that, you know, it's already happened. We just haven't seen it yet. And I'm going, no. They still have control of the legislative branch of our government, and firmly. So are we okay with the idea that absolutely nothing gets done until 2017? Are we okay with the idea that nothing gets done until then? And then we have to hope that the House doesn't stay completely crazy? Because I see the Senate flipping back to being to the Democrats' hands. I'm just like, bring me some moderate Republicans, something. How about a bunch of you Democrats change your name to Republican? Go over there. And then maybe we get some real change. But I look at this and I'm telling you, we live in very scary times, because these are people who most certainly, they do not believe in anything getting done. And it's all around these 40 or so representatives who are the Freedom Caucus, as if the Republican study committee or the little study group they had, that wasn't crazy enough. Now we have to break into the Freedom Caucus. So I'm curious, your thoughts on the Freedom Caucus, and has the freedom of nothing getting done, I guess it's the freedom of not doing your job. That's a fairly interesting one to me as well. Has that filtered down into the states, into a state like Pennsylvania? I would argue absolutely. But I'm curious your thoughts. 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, Rick Bloomingdale, president of the Pennsylvania AFL CIO, going to be here talking about Wednesday's vote and where the budget here in PA goes from this point forward. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
They saw the food was everything to man. And maybe then they had a thought to help the poorest folks, but it only brought more money to their hands. And the poor keep getting poorer. People turn away, not able to admit the way they planned. It's taking all the soul away from everything they grew. They can't handle it on which to stand.
Uncovering the con in conservatism. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1888. That was the day that the United Hebrew Trades was founded in New York City. The new effort was patterned after the United German Trades. The goal of the organization was to organize Yiddish-speaking workers. Individual Jewish workers had been active in the burgeoning U.S. trade union movement since the 1850s. But the United Hebrew Trades marked the first time for such a broad-based collective effort to organize Jewish workers. Three of the early founders were Bernard Weinstein, Morris Hillquit, and Abe Kane. Weinstein was a young shirt maker turned union activist. Morris Hillquit would become one of the leaders of the American Socialist Party in the United States. Hillquit was born in Latvia and moved with his family to the Lower East Side of New York. Like many Jewish workers, Hillquit found a job in the city's garment industry. He later graduated from law school. Abe Kane was born in Belarus. He was one of the leading voices in Jewish journalism in the United States. In 1877, he founded the newspaper, the Jewish Daily Forward, which still exists today. Under the leadership of these men, the United Hebrew Trades quickly became a presence in New York City. In March of 1890, 4,000 Jewish workers commemorated the Paris Commune with a march through the city. They more than doubled that number just 2 months later on May Day. By Labor Day, 15,000 Jewish workers marched together. These public demonstrations showed the power of Jewish workers. By 1910, the United Hebrew Trades had swelled to 106 unions. 150,000 men and women were members, including thousands of Italians and other nationalities. By the 1930s, the United Hebrew Trades had reached its peak of 250,000 members. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Eric Woosterwald. Republican presidential candidate Ben Carson came under fire for comments he made on Fox and Friends about a recent mass shooting in Oregon. Here's what he said.
Not only would I probably not cooperate with him, I would not just stand there and let him shoot me. I would say, hey guys, everybody attack him. He may shoot me, but he can't get us all.
Following backlash from media outlets including Vox, Huffington Post, and GQ, among others, who do you think came to Carson's defense? That's right, the co-hosts of Fox and Friends.
Suddenly, mainstream media is going, oh, well, it looks like you're blaming the victims for not doing something.
This isn't, and the mainstream media wants to now mischaracterize him as someone who's dancing on graves. That's unfair. It's incorrect. It's irresponsible.
I was shocked this became a 24-hour story.
In addition to defending his recent remarks, Ben Carson has been a longtime fixture on Fox News and was formerly on their payroll. The network essentially helped turn him into the presidential candidate he is today. For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happen!
Disorder in the house. There's a flaw in the system. And the fly in the ointment is going to bring the whole thing down.
That's an interesting way of putting it. The fly in the ointment can bring the whole damn thing down. And you look at what happened here in Harrisburg on Wednesday. Fairly along party lines, 127 to 73. A couple of Democrats flipping over. And in the more conservative southwestern part of the state, against the governor's tax plan, which, you look at our budget, you go, we've got bills we have to pay. There are things that we want. You've got to pay for those. There used to be a time where we used to think in terms of, okay, you want something, you got to pay for it. How's the best way to go about raising the revenue? I don't know. Responsibly taxing the drillers seems reasonable. I don't like an increase in the personal income tax, but if you've got bills to pay, you want roads plowed, you want them paved, you want kids to go to school, you want all those things, At some point, you have to pay for them. So I look at what happened on Wednesday, not surprised, more disappointed. And here to talk about the results and where we go from here, I've asked Rick Bloomingdale, president of the Pennsylvania AFL-CIO, to come talk with us. Rick, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, it's always a pleasure to be on the show.
So walk me through this. I don't think anyone was really surprised with Wednesday's outcome, were you?
No, there was some hope that, if it looked like a certain level was going to break, and folks would, start voting for it to move the budget process. But, really, we knew we were going to lose some Democrats, and if the Democrats weren't solid, even those Republicans who believe that we do have to pay our bills, which oddly enough isn't the quote unquote fiscally conservative Republicans. It's the more moderate ones who are acting fiscally conservative, unlike the quote unquote fiscally conservative ones who seem to want to pay our bills by borrowing and magic. They seem to think that there's some magic out there that's going to get us the money to educate our kids and, as you said, clean water. Make sure that our water processing and filtration plants have workers to make sure that they're doing the work of to keep our water clean, and roads and bridges and all those good things that come from tax dollars.
So there's not a bridge ferry or a highway ferry who will just take care of all that stuff?
No, not not that in this world, maybe in some other realm, but certainly in the realistic world of 2 + 2 = 4. You gotta pay for what you want to do, and this. Of course, they also have the mythical Department of Waste, Fraud, and Abuse, which, if you just clean up all the waste, fraud, and abuse, you'll have all the money you need. But over the last 20, 30 years, I think, given that we have the lowest number of public sector workers per capita in the nation, I think we've pretty much taken care of whatever waste, fraud, and abuse. I'm sure there's some minuscule amount, nothing to fill a $2 billion structural deficit that's been created, by the way, by stagnating wages.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that, that's something as a state we should be so proud of, that we have the lowest number of public sector workers, because I would argue then we get the lowest amount of public services and things that need to get done. So my question to that is always, what's being left undone?
Well, that's exactly right. When you have that low number, it's something for the politicians to brag about. Well, what they don't tell you is that they hire more contractors, which are less efficient. But you're right. If you don't have public sector workers to do the inspections of the drillers to make sure that they're not dumping the fracking chemicals into our clean water, and that you have make sure that work sites, we have some kind of safety inspections, although that's primarily OSHA, we still have a department in Pennsylvania that helps out with that. We also make sure wages are protected, that we don't have this huge wage theft problem. Part of the reason is that I would love it if employers were all honest, but unfortunately, without government regulation and oversight, folks steal from other folks, and it's a shame. But you look back in history, and everybody said, "Oh, well, we're going to have safe meat," because companies would go out of business if we didn't. And of course, we found, thanks to Upton Sinclair, in the jungle, the horrific conditions in the meat packing industry, and then led to the creation of the USDA's meat inspection program. Not so many things were done for the workers, but certainly for the consumers in terms of better protections. And that's what government does. And, this idea that somehow, folks want it, but again, you got to pay for it. And the fact that Corbett cut, business taxes by well over $1 billion, it's no wonder that, we've got this structural deficit. We keep taking money out of the system that provided all these great benefits by, getting these business tax giveaways. course, stagnating wages have had an impact because obviously 3%, our state income tax on $10 an hour is less than 3% on our really formerly great manufacturing jobs at $20, $30 an hour. So as we get more of a Walmart economy instead of a manufacturing economy, you're going to have, of course, less revenue coming in, and you got to figure out, what are the trade-offs there.
Right.
So we got a big problem facing us, and Governor Wolf seems to be the only one, and 73 Democrats who seem to want to actually address the problem and move Pennsylvania forward. We had 127 folks who, I guess, are hoping that as you mentioned, the roads and bridges ferry will and schools ferry will automatically provide us with more revenues to get the job done.
So let me ask you about some of the messaging that came out of Wednesday's vote, because if you were watching Twitter, if you're watching any of the messaging coming out of it, it was, seemed to be jubilation over the fact that we're not going to be taxing the drillers. And you had people like Representative Grove saying, if we start taxing these drillers on the profits that are leaving the state, it's going to hurt the poor people. And we now have found our love and our concern about poor people. And I'm going, am I hearing this right? After 4 years of painful cuts to social programs by people like Representative Grove, now he's found his concern for the poor and the downtrodden?
Well, and I don't know how he thinks that what they did on Wednesday is going to help anybody except the drillers make more money. And because these guys, they are not putting this money back into the economy either through higher wages, unless they're unionized, which most of them aren't. They are not and they're not hiring a lot of local folks to put them back to work. And when they do hire them, it's like I said, $9 or $10 an hour jobs. It's not the 30 or 40 hour jobs that are being paid to the folks from Oklahoma and Texas. The highly skilled driller jobs. It's and not that truck driving is not a skilled job, but they're starting them out at $10 an hour because when you've been laid off for so long, you might have been a well-paid truck driver, but you just want to get back to work. They take advantage of that, and the fact that they aren't union. They take some skilled folks and pay them crappy wages. So it's I don't know who he's talking about. It's going to be the only people that benefit from Wednesday are the millionaires and billionaires in this state. This was a huge loss to the people of Pennsylvania. The only silver lining is that Governor Wolf and the Democratic leadership showed that, look, they've got 73 people willing to move Pennsylvania forward. Will the Republicans have the guts and the courage to put up 30 votes to move this state forward, or are they content to have property taxes to continue to go up? Because schools have to pay teachers. So when we don't do our state education funding, who pays? It's the folks who pay property taxes will end up paying, and that's a more regressive tax. That hurts seniors and lower income folks who are struggling to keep their payments on their home if they're lucky enough to own a home, or if their landlord has to pay higher property taxes, he passes it on to them in rent increases. So the folks who are going to really suffer from Wednesday's failure and inaction is those folks who are struggling. This is a huge blow to anybody middle class or at the lower end of the middle class. It's unfortunate that somehow these guys think making the wealthy wealthier is somehow going to benefit poor people.
Let me ask you this, because one of the frames that came out is that some Republicans would have been okay raising taxes if it would have been a dollar for dollar trade-off with property tax. When I saw that, I'm going, well, this is just, we're shuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic. We're actually redistributing wealth away from from the working people of this country or this state by going, well, we'll lower your property taxes, but we're going to raise it over here. And it was, to me, kind of dumb, but it kind of what I was expecting.
Yeah, it's look, and I understand some of the people want to see what their money's going to be spent on, and we do have to, property tax, because it's a regressive tax and actually hurts folks at the lower end more than it does on the upper end, because they pay a higher percentage of their income towards property taxes rather than a higher percentage just on their income. So how you would do a dollar for dollar trade-off, I really don't understand that. But then you're right. We need more revenue. We have a $2 billion structural deficit. We need more revenue. We don't need to be shifting property taxes. Look, people need relief in property taxes, but cutting the state tax or property taxes by raising the state tax and having a neutral zero balance doesn't solve any problem.
It just seems to me that you have to raise the revenue where the revenue is, and I'm sorry, it's just not. It's not with the people who are struggling every day already. It's with taxing the drillers. It's with going after some of these tax breaks that we hand out to these big corporations. To me, that's the direction. Let me change issues real quick with you because I only got another minute or so. This November we're closing in on an election. I know a lot of people aren't talking about it. Really all the oxygen's been sucked out of the room with this more than 100-day budget fight. But this is a pretty important election coming up.
Absolutely, Rick. Look, folks need fair and even-handed and justice, both at the Commonwealth, Superior, and Supreme Court, as well as in your common pleas court. We got to make sure that people understand the importance, because we get out and we vote for a president or a governor or a state house or state men. No matter whatever laws that they pass can be reviewed as whether they're constitutional. So your rights to unemployment compensation, workers' compensation, how all that's calculated, pensions, folks, basic rights can be reviewed by the Supreme Court. The ability to draw fair districts, all those things are state house and state senate districts. All those are dealt with by the courts, and we need to make sure we're electing folks who have integrity, honesty, and will stand up for workers. And of course, we have a great ticket with David Wecht, Kevin Doherty, and Christine Donahue at the Supreme Court level, Alice Dubois at the Superior Court level, and Michael Wojcik at the Commonwealth Court level. Those 5 candidates are going to do a lot to help Pennsylvanians have a fair and equitable justice system, because I'll tell you, all 5 were recommended by the Pennsylvania Bar Association. All 5 of them have an incredible amount of integrity and honesty. And I just hope that folks will get out and vote on November 3rd and make sure that they vote for the judges as well as their local races that are happening.
Yeah, I've been telling my friends, if there's ever been an election you had to be part of, I think it's this one, because of the historic nature. I mean, this kind of a scenario hasn't happened since what, the late 1700s?
1600s, when King George appointed the first Supreme Court in Pennsylvania, was the last time we had 3 vacancies. So this time that we got 3 vacancies 300 years later, we got to make sure we fill them with people with some integrity. And of course, that's Wecht, Doherty, and Donahue, Dubois, and Wojcik. So I would hope that folks don't forget to vote on November 3rd and vote for candidates who are going to stand up for workers and give workers a fair hearing on the bench.
Yeah, and for me, the other part of this is 2020 is around the corner, and the Supreme Court here in Pennsylvania has really a very important role in that redistricting. I don't think most people understand just how involved our state's Supreme Court is in that process.
That's right. There's for the state house and state senate, where we now have 119 very conservative Republicans who don't want to move the state forward. There's a commission that draws those districts, 2 Dems, 2 Rs. Supreme Court picks the chairman. That chairman's either going to give us districts that are folks can run in, so voters have a choice, or they're going to give us districts where there's no choice, and we end up with incumbents that just keep winning over and over again because we don't have competitive districts. So the Supreme Court will help draw those districts in 2020, and we got to make sure that those districts are fair and competitive, and that folks have a chance to have competitive legislative races, so we can vote for candidates that are going to support us and not be stuck with candidates who are all in one party, either side, Dems or ours. We need competitive districts to get the best people into office. Unlike now, we have, single party rule in some districts, both D and R.
Yeah.
We need competition everywhere.
And the bizarre drawings that come out of it as well. And if people want to take a look at the 30th senatorial district here in Pennsylvania, you've got it up at the Twitter account. You can take a look at the giant gas cloud that I live in of the Calvin character at Rick Smith Show, my Twitter feed. No, it's just amazing. One of these things that you're going to have to go take a look at. But Rick, I appreciate you taking a little time for us. Thanks for filling us in on what happened on Wednesday, and looking forward to November 3rd.
Okay. Thank you, Rick. Always a pleasure.
Great talking with Rick Bloomingdale, president of the Pennsylvania AFL-CIO. Quick break. Right back with your thoughts. 1-888-520-RICK. 1-888-520-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
To lobby leaders for involvement. 3,000 people screaming out. Where's our government? Lawsuits and arraignments. Members under company surveillance. Public divided. Either they love us or they hate us. Profit billions off our back. And it's still not enough. They should have took into account that we never give up. We'll be here one day longer. One day longer. The people's voice is stronger. We work hard for our money. We work hard for respect. Keep fighting for these rights for generations. It's next. One day longer. One day longer. The people's
Your
voice is
working class
stronger.
radio experience, where hard work, common sense, and rational thoughts are a reality. The Rick Smith Show.
Let's just, get through this thing, and whatever it costs, it costs.
Senator Graham wants federal aid for South Carolina flooding, but voted against it for Hurricane Sandy.
We, the trade ministers, are pleased to announce that we have successfully concluded the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Environmental groups slam the TPP agreement. New rules to protect farm workers from pesticides. Fracking companies wasting taxpayer money. Plus,
our economies, our livelihoods, and our food all depend on our oceans.
2 new marine sanctuaries for the U.S.
All of those stories and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
You voted against that federal funding package during Hurricane Sandy.
I don't really remember that.
Really, Senator? You don't remember that?
I don't really recall that.
Are you sure?
No, we did check, and you did vote against that Hurricane
I
Sandy
might have
relief package.
Look at it and tell you why.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, my mind is still blown by Senator Lindsey Graham and the amazing hypocrisy.
Yes, in the wake of historic rainfall and catastrophic flooding in South Carolina caused by Hurricane Joaquin, South Carolina's Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, who is also running for president in 2016, took to the Senate floor to call for federal disaster relief funding.
As we get through this and look at the damages, we will ask only that is what is responsible. We're not going to ask the federal government to do anything that's beyond the responsibility of the government.
But after Hurricane Sandy, Senator Graham joined with Republicans in opposing federal disaster funding for victims of that disaster. When confronted by that fact on CNN, Graham said he didn't remember.
So rather than putting a price tag on it, let's just, get through this thing, and whatever it costs, it costs.
Your critics are already saying you want federal funding to help the people of South Carolina, but correct me if I'm wrong, you voted against that federal funding package for the folks in New Jersey during Hurricane Sandy.
I'm all for helping the people in New Jersey. I don't really remember that, me voting that way.
There was a big relief package that apparently you, a lot of other Southern senators and representatives voted against.
Yeah, well, anyway, I don't really recall that.
Yeah, not ringing a bell.
Oh, well. Meanwhile, U.S. international trade negotiators say the U.S., Japan, and 10 Pacific Rim nations have reached a final agreement on the largest regional trade accord in history, the controversial Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP. Negotiated in secret, the full text still has not been released, but core provisions received mixed reviews from environmental groups. The World Wildlife Fund praised new rules to stop illegal wildlife trafficking, but other environmental groups, like the Sierra Club, urged Congress to reject the pact, saying it gives corporations the right to sue a government to overturn environmental regulations that might impact future profits.
So corporations will have the right to sue governments because environmental regulations, they will say, are hurting their bottom line.
Yes, that's right. Even if it's far into the future, they can still sue.
Sounds like a great deal for Monsanto.
The Environmental Protection Agency has issued new rules to protect farm workers from pesticides on industrial farms. The first update to pesticide standards in 20 years. It includes the first ever ban on farm workers under 18 handling pesticides.
Speaking of Monsanto,
pesticide and herbicide use in the U.S. has soared with the introduction of genetically modified crops. Out of 2 million farm workers, the EPA estimates that 10 to 20,000 farm workers are poisoned by pesticides every year.
Thanks, Monsanto.
A new report charges that the drilling industry in the U.S. is wasting taxpayer money by flaring excess natural gas. Oil and gas companies burn off natural gas out in the field because it's too expensive to collect it for sale. The new report from Friends of the Earth calculates that more than $500 million worth of natural gas is wasted this way every year and calls on the Federal Bureau of Land Management to stop that flaring on public lands, saying taxpayers are losing more than $65 million worth of lost royalties.
That's those flames that are coming out of a pipe that you sometimes see when you drive by one of these fields.
That's right. Finally, some good news. President Obama has announced he's using his executive authority to create 2 new marine sanctuaries in the U.S. In a videotaped message to an international oceans conference, Obama stressed the importance of preserving the ocean.
Our economies, our livelihoods, and our food all depend on our oceans. And yet we know that our actions are changing them. And today I can announce we are taking steps to create 2 new marine sanctuaries, one in the tidal waters of Maryland and another in Lake Michigan.
New studies report that marine life has declined in the oceans 50% since 1970. Chile has also announced it will set aside the largest protected area in the Americas, as will New Zealand.
Obama's a tyrant. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget you can download our reports anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes. Find us and follow us on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Yes, it is all about the children, even after they're born. Rick Smith.
I guess it is all about the children, except at budgeting time. When it's good for a PR stunt, when it's good for a campaign slogan, oh, we care about the children. Oh, we love the children, except after they're born, need health care, need an education. Then, well, you got a political party in this country that doesn't seem to really give a rat's behind. Just is what it is. Reality being what reality is. And I think Wednesday's vote here in Pennsylvania kind of highlights that. What's interesting to me, and this is one of those kind of moments where you go, the insanity that we see, this rearranging of the deck chairs on the Titanic, so to speak. This idea, and the frame on Wednesday was, well, we'll vote to raise taxes if it's $1 for $1 reduction in property taxes. It's just a redistribution of the tax dollar. So what you're doing is you're saying, okay, people who own their homes, you're going to get a big tax break because we're going to tax poor people, and we'll tax you too. But you're going to see a small reduction in your property tax, but we're going to raise the bottom up. Here's the problem with that. Because a lot of the people at the very bottom, the folks who are struggling to make ends meet, are already struggling. You're going to see much more need for social programs, especially the charities. You know, the people that these conservatives say that they care so much about now, that they've found a newfound love and passion for. I've always argued, the best way to solve all of our problems, better jobs, better paying jobs. Where there is an opportunity to negotiate higher wages for people, that's the best of all scenarios, in my view. Because look, if you're making more money, you're paying higher taxes. And you're okay with that because, after all, you're making more money. Everything that the Republicans have done over the last 40 years, in my view, has been how to figure out how to redistribute wealth. We heard this a lot with the Tea Party people. You're talking redistribution of wealth. Yeah, I am. Much like it was when my grandparents' generation, when they were in the heart of their working lives. Ever since then, it's been this kind of, well, we'll raise taxes on poor working people so we can cut property taxes for the very wealthy, or cut corporate taxes or whatever. So that we have this trade-off where we're just shifting things around. We're still going to bring in the same lack of resources, but we're just going to rearrange it to make a certain voting constituency happy, which is kind of nuts. And what I've been saying is what needs to happen is we need to make sure that people are making a decent living. That whatever it is you do for work, where you spend your 40 hours a week, since we now say that's the standard in this country, you should be able to support a family and exist, not just survive and exist, but actually live. It takes me back to this old guy I remember when I first started working. I think he was Hungarian, actually. He said he came here so that he could work to live, instead of where he was from in Hungary, where you lived simply to work. And that's a huge mindset difference. We're now moving towards a society where, just to keep a roof over our head and food on the table, you're working 40, 50, 60 hours a week, and then being told that we're lazy and we don't have work ethic. And as I've said a number of times on this program, when Obama took office, my one want for him was to return that reward to work. To where if you're working, you're doing what you're supposed to do, you're playing by the rules, you're working hard, you're doing all that, then you can get ahead. It just hasn't happened. One of the reasons I voted for Obama from the beginning, the Employee Free Choice Act, didn't even get a consideration in the Democratic majority those first 2 years. Not even a consideration. So yesterday, I got like 4 or 5 emails from folks sending me Bernie Sanders, because look, big Bernie fan, Bernie Sanders and Mark Pocan. They've put forth a piece of legislation, the Workplace Democracy Act. To me, this is how we fix a lot of our problems, since we're hell-bent on redistributing wealth. Because in this country, the wealthiest country in the world, there's no reason for children to go hungry. There's no reason for roads to go unpaved and schools to have no books. There's no reason for that. It's an inefficient use of our resources. And I would argue that, much like my Republican friends say, well, we can raise personal income taxes on those people if we can give property taxes to these people. Basically a political reshuffling, if you will. I say we can take some of those corporate profits that are being hoarded all around the world and by large investment companies and large investors and the billionaire class that we have, redistribute it down to the working people who earned it through collective bargaining agreements, whatever you want to call them, so that their wages go up, their standard of living goes up, and by the way, they pay more taxes into our coffers, which means we can fill our budget gap. Sounds reasonable, right? Rational, sane. That's how I would do things. And fortunately, we've got a presidential candidate in Bernie Sanders who's saying that's how we should be doing it as well. Instead of the Republican view, and now look, this is a which side are you on moment. Because you had Scott Walker running around going, I made Wisconsin the 25th right to work state, even though there's no rights and there's no work. It just means lower wages, less benefits, and working conditions that go downward. So think about it in the very simplistic frame. We see where the Republicans want to take us. The whole no rights at work agenda. Destroy your right to bargain, destroy your unemployment insurance, destroy workers' comp, all because those other people, they're lazy. They're not working hard like you. Or the other side of it, where I'm at, where you go, if you work hard, you play by the rules, you should get ahead. It's that simple. So what Bernie Sanders and Mark Pocan have done is this piece of legislation. I like the name, the Workplace Democracy Act. They have said, look, what we're going to do away with the two-stage balloting process, which means you sign the authorization card, you start bargaining. You get 50% plus one, you begin bargaining. It's that simple. He also wants to guarantee that first contract, because anybody who's ever done this kind of stuff knows that the companies can drag their feet. They can stall for eternity with our current labor laws, which are broken. And that first contract never comes. And then they just weed out all of the supporters, and then it never happens. We need to strengthen and expand the enforcement ability of the National Labor Relations Board. They have to have some teeth. We need to undo all of the legal ramblings that have gone on, that have limited strikes, that have basically made it illegal to boycott, a whole bunch of this stuff. We need to stop with the no rights at work stuff, do away with that, undo Taft-Hartley, as I've said 1,000 times, get away with this idiotic demarcation of a right to work state, which is ridiculous. And then a bunch of other things. I mean, the idea that you're going to secure rights for all workers, not just here in the US, but across the globe. If there's an American company doing business in China or elsewhere, and they're treating their employees crummy, those workers would be able to come back here and say, you know what, you've got to hold us to a higher standard. Oh, can't have that. Would be bad for free trade, wouldn't it? I think that's kind of the point. Kind of the point is to start looking at how do we make sure that we're not racing ourselves right to the bottom. I think this is an interesting idea. I think it's a good step in the right direction. There's a lot of this stuff that, to me, if we were simply giving people the power to bargain and to earn higher wages, I don't think we would have the budget problems that we have. And I also don't think we'd have the anger, and maybe a whole different political process as well. But to me, it all comes back to when you're sitting at your kitchen table doing your bills and you realize there's not enough money there. Anger is one of those reactions. And the wealth class of this country has done a really great job of sending the red meat out for you to blame. It's those politicians, it's government, it's them, without looking at going, wait a minute. It's this wealth class that we've created. It's this corporate class that we've created, that we've given all of this power to. That's what we need to rein back in. And we do that through our government. That's the reality. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Toward the end of his life, the civil rights champion and Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall was asked how he wanted to be remembered. He did the best he could with what he had, Marshall replied. That's really the most any of us can do, and those who achieve it tend to make a lasting contribution to bettering our world, no matter who they are. Luckily, there are many such people across our land, working in our neighborhoods, cities, states, and occasionally at the national level, including Reverend Everett Parker, who recently died at 102 years old. In the early 1960s, he noticed that many television and radio stations were blatantly racist. They refused to cover the African American community, ignored civil rights news, openly used on-air slurs and racist portrayals of black people, had no integrated programming, and failed to hire minorities. Others noticed this same institutional racism, of course, but Reverend Parker decided to do something. As the communications director of the United Church of Christ, He began to monitor stations and file actions with the FCC, the federal overseer of our public airwaves. In 1964, the commission conceded that Parker was correct, that discrimination was rampant, but decreed that viewers had no standing to challenge a station's license. But Parker kept pushing, and 5 years later, he and we won a court ruling that, quote, a broadcast license is a public trust subject to termination for breach of duty. Since then, he and such allies as Public Citizen organized volunteers to monitor stations, demand reforms, and train minority broadcasters. This is Jim Hightower saying, over time, by simply doing the best he could, Reverend Parker's initiative and tenacity helped alter the whole industry's guiding ethic, recognizing, in his words, that to serve the public interest, they must, quote, serve all the public.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's populist take on what the powers that be are up to. Find out more at hightowerlowdown.org.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Interesting survey out by the Community Catalyst and SEIU that found that, guess what? People want the Affordable Care Act expanded rather than to be repealed. In fact, they did polling in 5 battleground states, Florida, Nevada, Ohio, Virginia, and right here in Pennsylvania. And they found of them, 64% of the people say the ACA or Obamacare here to stay. And 71% said elected officials should work to fix the problems with it and give up this idea of repealing it. They also went on to say that, look, these politicians need to stop wasting time going after this, according to 58%. And when you go down the list and the numbers they came up with in their survey, very telling. People want better services. People want quality. People want decent prices. They want transparency. All of which partially the ACA does. Could it be more? Absolutely. In fact, one of the strongest parts is that would require hospitals and other healthcare providers to be transparent in their prices. 3/4 of people, of likely voters, said that was important to them. What's interesting to me about this poll, though, about this survey, is as you go down the list, we want companies to be prevented from charging copays for medications. That goes down to 70%. You start moving your way down, wanting to change the way insurance companies pay doctors and hospitals, with incentives and all this stuff, getting a little more into the weeds, down to 64%. Medicare should negotiate for prescription drug prices, falls to 63, still strong support. And you keep going down, giving the state more control, more authority to look into insurance company practices, 57%. And it seems to me that people have strong reactions to what they want. Just not quite sure how we're getting there. Here on the state level, here in Pennsylvania, 80% of the people here strongly supported the governor's expansion of Medicaid. Again, look at our friends in the GOP, strongly opposed to expanding Medicaid. What did they get? 80%. And you go back to this and you keep going exactly what's going on. The people are on the side of the governor. And I think that's going to help in this budget negotiation, because he's been right. He was absolutely right with expanding Medicaid. He's absolutely right in going after funding education. And I think he's right not to give in and say we're not going to, we'll just cut and play gimmicks and play games and do tricks or whatever, or hope that a fairy shows up. Hope that somebody with some pixie dust will help push in that direction. So good news on the healthcare front. And as I said from the beginning, what's going to happen with this, it'll be just like Medicare. The establishment was dead set against it. The wealth class dead set against it. But as people got a hold of it, they wanted it, and they wanted it better. Good news. Good stuff. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. With a strike at Fiat Chrysler having been averted, UAW workers will soon be voting on that second tentative agreement. UAW leaders say significant gains were made in the second round of bargaining. The union's bargaining committee voted to send the proposed contract to local UAW leaders and their Chrysler Council. The UAW Chrysler Council will meet Friday in Detroit to review and vote on the tentative agreement. If they approve, the UAW plans to make details of the new agreement public immediately. Then it still must be ratified by rank-and-file UAW workers at Fiat Chrysler. UAW President Dennis Williams says leadership heard the members and went back to the table at Fiat Chrysler to strengthen the new labor agreement. Williams says he believes this new tentative agreement addresses UAW members' principal concerns about their jobs and their futures. U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders and Representative Mark Pocan this week introduced the Workplace Democracy Act. Senator Sanders says it would greatly strengthen the rights of American workers to join unions.
This legislation will make it easier for workers to join unions and collectively bargain for higher wages and stronger benefits. Under this legislation, when a majority of workers in a bargaining unit sign valid authorization cards to join a union, they will have a union. End of discussion.
United Food and Commercial Workers President Mark Perrone says talk at the White House Worker Voice Summit won't be enough. Perrone says action must be taken. Action, he says, to stop, quote, irresponsible employers that cut wages and benefits, misclassify workers as independent contractors or hire temporary workers to avoid responsibilities as an employer, and punish those who speak out and try to better their lives, end quote. American Federation of Teachers President Randy Weingarten says Hillary Clinton's opposition to the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade agreement has proven again that she is a champion for working people. The AFT endorsed Clinton for president in July. Weingarten says the TPP threatens to harm workers and the environment. While most Americans still struggle to get ahead, Weingarten says, trade agreements like the TPP only make their situation worse.
Workers Independent News is brought to you with support from union-owned, union-represented Bank of Labor. Bank of Labor has provided trust and fiduciary services to labor organizations for nearly a century. Online at bankoflabor.com.
Workers Independent News made possible in part through underwriting support from the OPEIU, the Office and Professional Employees International Union, and from the National Association of Letter Carriers. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
China needs our market. Their economy is dependent on exports to the United States. And we have bargaining power. The problem that we've got with China is not that we couldn't work out a deal in which they are benefiting and we are benefiting. The problem is that for all the tough talk of George W. Bush, he is a patsy when it comes to negotiating these agreements. And what we need to do is to just be better bargainers and say, look, here's the bottom line. You guys keep on manipulating your currency. We are going to start shutting off access to some of our markets. If you are doing the right thing and not trying to manipulate your currencies to disadvantage us, then you will have access. It's a pretty straightforward proposition.
Yeah, it's a pretty straightforward proposition, isn't it? We just need to be better bargainers. We can work out a deal that'd be better for both of us. We'd all win, right? What a difference between campaign Obama from 2008, which is what you heard in the clip there, and today looking at this from what we know of the Trans-Pacific Partnership Free Trade Agreement. Look, it could be the greatest trade agreement ever written in the history of trade agreements. And the fact that it was dealt in secret kind of makes me go, I don't think so. But here to talk a little bit about this and what it means for workers, not just here in the U.S., but across the globe, I've asked Mateus Vernango to come talk with us. He's a professor of economics at Bucknell University, also does an amazing blog, Naked Keynesianism, which we've got a link to at thericksmithshow.com. Mateus, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me.
So we just need to be better bargainers, Mateus. It's not that difficult. We can do it.
Yeah, that's difficult to believe, isn't it? The notion that there will be some trade agreement that finally would be good for workers, and that's a little bit the issue that I think it's camouflated in all of these discussions. It's even in political discussions. If you think of Donald Trump saying that Donald Trump has that discourse too, that if he's going to bargain better and we're going to have so much winning against China that it will come out of our ears or something like that. And it's it's a supposition that trade is about U.S. wins or loses and China wins or loses. In this case, China is not on TPP, I should notice, but it's really about workers and capitalists. It's about corporations winning and workers losing. And almost every single trade agreement we have signed, going back to certainly NAFTA, but we signed a trade agreement during the Obama administration. So we signed with South Korea, with Colombia,
and Panama.
Basically, workers tend to lose.
Yeah, that's the thing. And every one of these
unicorn is the trade agreement in which if we bargain well, workers are going to be fine, has not been seen.
Well, I mean, you look at NAFTA. I go back to NAFTA as kind of that when the message was new and we were kind of going, oh, maybe it sounds like plausible that we're going to increase trade, be good for all sides of the borders, wages will go up, everything will be fabulous. And then you saw after it happened, it didn't happen. Wages actually went down in virtually all the countries and we were all worse off for it. And you go, probably shouldn't do that again, right?
Yeah, well, corporations did pretty well. So that's the story of all trade agreements. There are, and part of the discussions with TPP have been people that traditionally have been in favor of free trade agreements. Paul Krugman, the economist that writes in the New York Times, he was very much for NAFTA, and the Clintons. So Bill Clinton and Hillary back in the 90s and were certainly for NAFTA, have now looked more skeptical. And part of the reason, I think, is because at least to some extent, we have managed to bring into the debate the notion that some of these agreements are ways to protect corporations.
Right. And I think the biggest one, looking at the drug prices, I mean, the fact that we're going to do in patents and all of this stuff, what has that got to do with the guy on the assembly line maintaining patents for how many years into the future? That's not part of, is that part of trade? Am I missing something? Are we trading widgets? Or
well, the thing is that, so part of the discussions over trade over the last 20 years, the so-called Doha round of, after the Uruguay round of the World Trade Organization, the thing that came before the World Trade Organization, led to this round in which they wanted to expand the discussion of free trade to other areas, including trading services, the flows of capital investment, and the rules that regulate investment. And a lot of those end up being associated. So there is, companies that do pay for use of property rights of other companies, royalties, and so on and so forth. And so that's the sort of thing that has been sort of included in several of these trade agreements. We have free trade agreements, and we also have bilateral investment agreements, and this is sort of a hybrid. That's what TPP is not. It's not called a free trade agreement. It's some sort of hybrid in which includes all of those things. It does have implications for workers here and in developing countries in the following sense: to protect the patent rights and extend the patent rights of medications, for example. Pharmaceuticals has been in discussion with respect to this one, and there was a big pressure group from pharmaceutical firms. It reduces the ability of governments to produce generic medication. And generic medication, it's been explicit with this guy that just bought a company and increased the price of the medication from $1,350 to $750 a pop, and basically it increases the cost of healthcare. So the inability of governments to produce generic medication would have an impact on the well-being of workers overall. So in that sense, it's dangerous.
No, I'm with you. And looking at that case, I mean that isn't a lone instance. I mean those things happen all the time. It's just that it was so outrageous that it caught our attention. But that kind of gouging goes on all the time, doesn't it, Mateus?
Oh yeah, sure. No, that's definitely the case. And what a trade agreement does is that it binds governments and it makes it more difficult to try to prosecute this type of behavior, or to, for example, I always give the following example. This was a long time ago, the discussion of antiretrovirals and AIDS medication. And Brazil had a program in which they gave this medication to people with HIV. And it was a program that was praised. The New York Times had a whole thing praising how Brazil didn't have, like certain countries in Africa, an outbreak, a significant outbreak and of an epidemic of AIDS. And part of the reason is also that they were doing prevention and they were giving medication and treating people with the disease. And part of the regulations is that Brazil had some generic, some rules, patent rules that allowed Brazil to provide generic medications for certain things. And the Brazilian rule was the following: so if the company wanted to produce the medication locally, they could come to Brazil and produce it. And so the Brazilian government wouldn't produce the generic. But then they'll be circumscribed by price controls. And so they couldn't sell it by whatever price they wanted, you see, because this is a medication that has a public health relevance to it. And so they would control prices. Price controls are not necessarily a bad thing. So this sort of thing eliminates the possibility of governments producing generics or including price controls. So it doesn't allow them to negotiate with corporations, which at the end of the day is equivalent to say, because healthcare is like a social wage that the government pays and actually subsidizes, corporations that don't have to pay health for their workers because the government is providing to some extent that. And so by making it more expensive to the government, you're basically reducing the social wage that it's provided to workers. So it's a very complicated sort of thing also, because it involves all of these details on whenever you violate any of these rules, which court will actually resolve these issues and whatnot. So at the end of the day, we're going to be there'll be a myriad of lawyers looking into this sort of issues before the final agreement is actually voted, I suppose.
Right. But one of the things that's interesting to me, though, is I hear a lot of the local control conservatives who will be probably supporting this. It kind of goes against that whole local control idea, because there's this investor dispute settlement thing there. That basically takes control out of local governments or the U.S. government from doing a lot of things, because you can be sued in these international tribunals, right?
Yes. That's again, and you're touching on an important issue. So I'll be surprised if there is a decent chance that this will pass, and I personally will be surprised if it doesn't pass. We have, that's the only kind of legislation in the Obama administration that has had bipartisan support, and so and as you said, for conservatives, this is a sort of a very peculiar one to favor, not just because of this sort of a local versus internationalist sort of view, which you're right, maybe in that respect, Democrats would be sort of okay. Although Democrats should be against this as a more general thing of protecting labor and jobs and
one would think. But I got to be honest, though.
At least, but there'll be a few. I should say more than a few Democrats that would vote against this for sure. But at the end of the day, what's surprising is that the Republican Party has been against almost everything that Obama does, and so the fact that they come out and vote for this is sort of a peculiar thing. I should say that a few months, I think now, probably don't remember, but when the fast track was approved, so the government could only negotiate this deal because the Congress gave Obama a fast track, meaning the Congress basically said that Obama could negotiate in its name, and then they'll just give a up or down vote in Congress in order to approve or not. So that they're not going to twist around with the agreement. Otherwise, it's not an agreement. If they come back and say, well, we like this part but not this part, and so on and so forth. So then all of the 12 countries would have to renegotiate and so on and so forth. So it's just an up or down vote now.
Right.
And among the two that wrote in the Wall Street Journal favoring giving Obama fast track, although they quite didn't say that they were for giving more power to Obama, was Ted Cruz. So Ted Cruz was there in the Wall Street Journal saying, we have to vote for this, and basically was a vote that would empower Obama to go and negotiate stuff, which I found incredible. So you have this guy, that says, that Obama is terrible, that you shouldn't give him any power to do anything, voting for giving more power to Obama. So there is a contradiction. And it also shows that bipartisanship, as much as it would be good if, you can get bipartisanship to reach reasonable solutions for actual problems, bipartisanship is not always a good thing. So in this case, bipartisanship is in the name of actually, defending a policy that will hurt a good chunk of the American people, working class for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, because I remember saying as the whole fast track thing was going on, it'll be interesting to see where the Republicans fall. Are they more in love with the money that comes from corporate America or their hatred of Obama? Obviously, the money wins.
Oh yeah, and I think the coded language is there. Part of what you may see when you look at people talking about this. So Orrin Hatch, for example, very conservative senator from Utah, he quite didn't say that he's against. He said that he's rethinking and he's going to review it. He never said I'm really against it. He has some reservations. Hillary, that was more openly against, she actually had to be pressed. She twice was asked, in the PBS interview, and in the second time she didn't say that she was against. She said that that she's not in favor as it currently stands. So I would be skeptical also, given the track record of hers and of her husband certainly on this, about what's the meaning of that. So the notion is that somehow, she suggested that somehow there would be a trade agreement that would lead to higher wages and better, working conditions in the U.S. I should say, one of the things that people don't tend to because we don't look at the numbers often. So the U.S. from more or less the 1980s until the early 2000s had, almost constant manufacturing jobs. The peak was at the early 80s, 19 million jobs. And by the year 2000, it was more or less the same, like 17 million or so. And considering that the labor force had grown a lot, so in relative terms, manufacturing jobs had decreased a lot.
Correct.
But in absolute numbers, it wasn't quite a big collapse. But after the entry of China in the WTO, manufacturing jobs collapsed. So they went to below 10 million jobs, and they have been recovering. So they're around 12 million jobs, but they have collapsed.
Oh, absolutely.
So the notion that there is no effect is very hard to support with the data.
Now, I mean, you go back to the strong dollar policies and Reagan's policies back in the 80s that cost some of those jobs. But really, you're right. It was China coming in and getting permanent national normal trade relations, and then just the outsourcing of all of these jobs. And I say we didn't lose them. We know exactly where they are. They're in China.
Yeah, and I should say, not that I want to bring any of the discussions on immigration but part of that it's also in Mexico. Although when you look, Mexico actually, so even a lot of those are actually in China, because Mexico has a big trade surplus with the U.S., but Mexico has a big trade deficit with China. So even part of what looks like to be Mexico, they're actually China. They're disguised because they enter through a different sort of mechanism. So, So China has been really important in this shift. I mean, the U.S. has officially 5.1% unemployment. So you'll get a conservative economist telling you, well, but we don't have a problem because we're close to full employment or something along those lines. And it's true. I mean, the situation in unemployment is not as terrible as it would be if we just lost the jobs and didn't create other jobs. But the quality of the jobs is not the same. And so you're losing good manufacturing jobs with all the benefits and so on and so forth, and they're being substituted by service jobs with Mac jobs, as it used to be said, that don't have benefits, that they're minimum wage, that they are dead ends, that you cannot sort of go ahead and improve and have higher wages and so on and so forth. So the quality of the jobs has also been affected by all of these trade agreements.
So let me ask you last line of questioning then, because we know that I think we've walked around the fact that not good stuff. Politically, I mean, you got Bernie Sanders out there who's been completely against it from the beginning. In fact, Bernie has been against every one of these bad job-killing trade agreements. You got Hillary, who was kind of on the fence, now coming out, still kind of on the fence, but against it a little bit. You got Donald Trump saying he would do things better. Politically, are we moving in a direction where maybe this ends?
Well, at least you're right that we're at least moving in a direction in which, and you're right on this, although I would like to see what Trump has to say on this, because Trump was sounding very populist also on taxes, that he wanted to tax the very wealthy, but at the end of the day, his proposal is not very different from Bush, and he's given a tax cut to the rich. So, but you're right that both Trump, so the populists on the right and the progressive populists, whatever you want to call on the left, have been more prominent, and that has pushed more conventional people like Hillary. I haven't seen that on the Republican Party to come out against this kind of agreement. So I think that there also has been a lot of other stuff. We should also praise here social movement. So since Seattle in 1999, and particularly with all of this, sort of complaints against corporations after particularly the crisis and Occupy Wall Street and whatnot, there's more of an understanding that this hurts not just working people, it hurts the middle class too. So at the end of the day, there should be a broad coalition against this kind of agreement. So I think it's more visible. Mind you, there are things that once you get somebody elected, or as you showed at the beginning of the show, you have Obama, saying one thing, and then slowly moving as he gets into government, into actually negotiating several of these trade deals. So the governing is very different than running a campaign. So one has to be careful about how much one can trust politicians on what they say. So I wouldn't trust them all in the same way.
Yeah, I don't trust them, but you have to hold them accountable, and that's why you need to have those movements to make sure that they are heading in the right track or staying where they say they're going to go. But the last question then, if you had to give a prediction, yes, thumb up or thumb down?
You mean that it will pass or not?
Yes.
I think it will pass. I mean, I think it will be close, but I think it will pass. I'm a pessimist. In this case, this is sort of for me a bad result. So I tend to think that it might pass, because I tend to think that a lot of the people that say they have reservations in the last minute, they will end up voting for. Because there will be a lot of arm twisting, and remember, the people that are for these are the people that pay for the political campaign.
Yeah, and I was going to say there'll be a lot of big checks floating around, I'm sure. The best democracy money can buy.
Yep.
Mateus, I appreciate you taking some time for us and filling us in. I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Oh, thank you.
Great talking with you, Mateus Vernango. Does some great writing over at nakedkeynesianism.com. We've got a link at the ricksmithshow.com, how you can get there. Just click on Mateus' name. Take you right there. Quick break, right back. 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show. For working people, come to talk.
Gonna work on Maggie's farm no more.
Exposing that free trade is never free. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1888. That was the day that the United Hebrew Trades was founded in New York City. The new effort was patterned after the United German Trades. The goal of the organization was to organize Yiddish-speaking workers. Individual Jewish workers had been active in the burgeoning U.S. trade union movement since the 1850s. But the United Hebrew Trades marked the first time for such a broad-based collective effort to organize Jewish workers. Three of the early founders were Bernard Weinstein, Morris Hillquit, and Abe Kane. Weinstein was a young shirt maker turned union activist. Morris Hillquit would become one of the leaders of the American Socialist Party in the United States. Hillquit was born in Latvia and moved with his family to the Lower East Side of New York. Like many Jewish workers, Hillquit found a job in the city's garment industry. He later graduated from law school. Abe Kane was born in Belarus. He was one of the leading voices in Jewish journalism in the United States. In 1877, he founded the newspaper, the Jewish Daily Forward, which still exists today. Under the leadership of these men, the United Hebrew Trades quickly became a presence in New York City. In March of 1890, 4,000 Jewish workers commemorated the Paris Commune with a march through the city. They more than doubled that number just 2 months later on May Day. By Labor Day, 15,000 Jewish workers marched together. These public demonstrations showed the power of Jewish workers. By 1910, the United Hebrew Trades had swelled to 106 unions. 150,000 men and women were members, including thousands of Italians and other nationalities. By the 1930s, the United Hebrew Trades had reached its peak of 250,000 members. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We've been discussing the role that James Starnes played in the ceremonial Japanese surrender ending World War II. Starnes always remembered 3 problems. First, the table set up for the signing was too small for the surrender documents. Then the Canadian representative signed on the wrong lines. Finally, at the end, his Air Force flyover booked for General MacArthur was late arriving. Starnes particularly remembers his feelings on that historic day, though. He said he was elated, but that soon melted into solemn moments. He said, "I realized I'd gotten through all of it. I had a lot of friends who died, and here it was all over with." 60 years later, Starnes stated, "A lot of people had looked at me as some sort of hero, but I wasn't a hero. I was just a participant who happened to be in a particular spot at a particular time." This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
I will oppose the Colombia Free Trade Agreement, and I want Congress to pass a set of trade deals. Send a message to Congress to come to an agreement on trade deals.
'Cause they're selling make-believe and we don't buy that good. 'Cause in the real world they're shutting Detroit down, while the boss man takes his bonus pay, jets on out of town. And DC's bailing out them bankers as a farmer's auction ground. Yeah, while they're looking up on Wall Street.
Where is Campaign Obama? Where is Campaign Obama? Did we lose him? Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Real quick story from Business Insider. The richest man in Brazil, he has a dream. Not a good kind of dream, though, to be honest with you. But he has a dream, And that dream is to take over Coca-Cola. Yep, he wants to take over Coke and, lay off all the employees. I'm not making this up. This is one of those you go, what? This is this guy going, look, they got about 100,000 workers worldwide. The company, he says, couldn't be run by about 200 people. So what does that mean? Well, it means more profit for him, evidently. Now you go, he's just a rich guy crack. No, this is a serious thing. He already controls Burger King, Kraft, the Stella Artois beer thing and their company, and Heinz. And he's got a reputation for being a cutthroat capitalist. Goes in massive layoffs. Any acquisition comes with massive layoffs. So Bloomberg's reporting he's eyeing Coca-Cola $178.2 billion. Chump change, right? With what they've got stored overseas, you never know. According to the Citizens for Tax Justice, you're going to love this. And the U.S. Public Interest Research Group, they did a little study, and I guess this stuff we already knew, but it's nice to have the actual numbers. They looked at the 500 largest companies here in the U.S. And what they found is that the 500 big boys, they've accumulated something like 2.1 trillion with a T. That's just the top 500. That's not all of the rest. They've accumulated 2.1 trillion with a T dollars in offshore accounts. And why is that? Well, to avoid paying taxes. If they had to pay their taxes, our coffers would be about $620 billion heavier, which means we could fund, think about the roads and bridges we could pave with that. And you wonder why they're not getting done? Well, 620 billion of it sitting in one of these offshore accounts in places like Luxembourg and the Bahamas or Ireland or Bermuda or the Netherlands, those places, nice little tax havens for them. What they found is about 3/4 of the Fortune 500. They owe us and have hoarded money somewhere. They also point out that Apple was the biggest offender. They hold something about like $181 billion offshore, the most of any American company, and they would have to pay something like $59.2 billion in taxes, which means that we could pave those roads and bridges. The other company behind them, pretty far behind, General Electric, about $119 billion in 18 of these tax havens. Microsoft with $108.3 billion in 5 tax havens, and Pfizer, the big drug company, they're hoarding about $74 billion overseas with 151 subsidiaries. What they found is about 72% of the Fortune 500, or 358 of the companies, had used this loophole that we've allowed. Honestly, it is what it is. They also found a concentration of the you look at the 1% of the 1%, they found 30 of the Fortune 500 companies, just 30 of them had accumulated $1.4 trillion of the 2.1, just 30 of them. They also found that if 57 of the companies would have paid their combined taxes, about $184 billion in U.S. Money in their coffers. The conclusion, and this is what they came up with, Congress can and should take strong measures to prevent companies from using tax havens, which in turn would restore basic fairness to the tax system, reduce the deficit, and improve the functioning of markets. Gee, do you think this dysfunctional crew can possibly not even pass it? I'm not even going to go with passage. I'm going with considering. Considering is kind of the first stage. It's kind of like when you tell somebody who you may think is an alcoholic, admitting it's the first step. Considering, not passing, just considering, might be the first step. It's nuts. I'll tell you, just nuts what we've given to these big corporations. Just nuts. Quick break. Right back with Isaiah Poole, Our Future Friday. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people on the talk.
I'm working all the time. It seems to me I could live my life That's why they call me. They call me the working man.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
There isn't anyone immune from globalization. In fact, the confluence of greed and geography blends seamlessly over all of humanity. As the American workforce has become more sophisticated and smart, corporations have become less agreeable. Of course, there were numerous road signs that led to globalization, and at this point, somewhat improbable that any single cause could be raised from the economic wreckage it has created. However, 1976 may have been a high watermark for the American economy, where a change in the tax code emboldened corporations to move more operations overseas. Where these gutless entrepreneurs once shuttered factories in the Northeast and moved them to southern localities, they were now served up by the U.S. Congress, a world plate where even to their insatiable greed, the possibilities seemed limitless. The assault on American workers continued in the 1980s when the Reagan administration further retooled the tax code to allow foreign investors to set up American subsidiaries, thereby artfully managing the exodus of U.S.-based corporations. The unseemly alliance between Congress and corporations offers little solace to workers, but does shine a perpetual light on the misgivings of unregulated money flowing into the pockets of greedy politicians. Unions, while greatly weakened over the last 2 decades, continue to mount credible defenses, proposing balance, equity, and fairness for workers over the broader brush of Congress that would have us believe that globalization can regulate itself. This Rick Smith Show Labor History Minute is brought to you by a grant from the Labor Education Center at IUP. For more information, go to www.thericksmithshow.com.
Just when you thought it was safe, those crazy Republicans are at it again. It's time for the Rick Smith Show's Conservative Alerts.
I gotta tell you, my favorite quote out of the whole Kevin McCarthy exit comes from Charlie Dent. And to be honest, I've never been a huge Charlie Dent fan. 10, I guess it's longer than that, longer than 15 years ago. I saw him as, kind of at the fringe then. Now the moderate. Who said that the same members who wanted to take down John Boehner, I always said would try to frag the next guy. Well, they just fragged Kevin McCarthy. And I think that's my favorite quote out of the whole day with the Hell No Caucus, or the Mad Max Caucus, or the Scorched Earth Caucus. Come up with your own adjective to throw in there. And here to talk a little bit about this on our Future Friday, I've got Isaiah Poole, Campaign for America's Future. Isaiah, thanks for taking time for us.
My pleasure.
So we fragged poor Kevin McCarthy.
Yeah, I mean, and we saw this coming, didn't we? There was this group of 30 or 40 or so House members who formed this Freedom Caucus because the caucus that already existed to serve or to advance conservative interests, a mechanism called the Republican Study Group, was not right enough for these guys. So this Freedom Caucus got started, and these Freedom Caucus people are fairly rigid and fairly absolutist, and they want someone who will really ram through their conservative agenda. There is one element out there that is not so ideological, or at least not ideological in the sense that we're talking about it in terms of issues like Obamacare, which they hate, and immigrants who they hate, and so forth. And there is this the rumors, of course, floating around Capitol Hill that Kevin McCarthy had, shall we say, a female skeleton in his closet.
For another representative, as I understand.
Another representative, as you understand it. And none of those rumors have been proven. In fact, the woman who was involved, was not one of the people backing McCarthy for Speaker. Nonetheless, this rumor is out there. It prompted the letter from the Congressman Walter Jones, saying that if you have any misdeeds you should that are in your background, you should withdraw yourself. And sure enough, McCarthy withdrew himself.
Yeah, but here's the thing: I don't care if he had. I honestly don't care if he had a relationship with someone else. That's between him and his wife. My problem with the politics, and I guess maybe this is how I look at things. I care about what you're going to do. I don't care who you're doing. I care about what you're going to do for me and for our country. All of that other stuff to me is just a distraction.
And yes, but let's get to the substance. And the substance was that McCarthy was not perceived to be, number one, was not perceived to be a person who would do things differently from the way John Boehner did.
Right.
And if you happen to think that John Boehner was somehow too accommodating to the Obama agenda, you and I cannot figure how more obstructionist you could be. But, there is the strain out there that as obstructionist as John Boehner was, he wasn't obstructionist enough. And McCarthy was not going to be significantly different.
Right.
The other thing, as much as it is true that the reason for this latest Benghazi panel is to bring down Hillary Clinton's poll numbers.
Of course.
You're not supposed to say it.
When I heard that he had exited, it wasn't the sex scandal supposedly. I thought it was that stupid comment where he goes, "Screw this, I don't want to."
That was the snowball that started rolling down the mountain, for sure. And the truth of the matter is, as crazy as these guys are, some of them at least want to have someone who can talk smoothly, can say things in a way that in and of itself doesn't create more controversy. And McCarthy is not a wordsmith, that we know. With the English language, he is untrustable.
That's an interesting way of framing it. So who is the guy? I mean, is it going to be Paul Ryan, or do we see a John Boehner coming back, or we pine for the days of John Boehner?
Well, what's weird about Ryan is that Ryan is he's as far as the ways of the House are concerned. My perception of him is that he's going to be more of an old school guy. He's going to be the kind of guy who will, for better or worse, run the House the way we've seen Republican leaders in the past run the House. I don't see him. I would be very surprised, given the ultimatum that the Freedom Caucus has put out there. I would be very surprised to see Ryan agree to those. He may agree with much of their agenda, but I'm not quite sure that he would agree with their my way or the highway approach.
Interesting. So who do you see? I mean, not the guy who just did the Planned Parenthood thing. I mean, please, not him. Although I got to be honest, that would be fun to watch.
It would be fun to watch. I actually don't. I really don't have a good feel right now for who's going to emerge out of this. Ryan would be an interesting choice. I'm not quite sure. Like I said, I'm not quite sure that if this were the Republican Party of 10 or 15 years ago, Ryan would make perfect sense. This is not your daddy's Republican Party.
Yeah. What about Jim Jordan, the guy from Ohio, who, as I understand, is the chairperson or the head honcho with the Freedom Caucus, or you call it the Mad Max Caucus, because I think that's the world that they're trying to move us towards. That whole you're on your own and traveling the byways for gas.
And a world in which if you're not 100% ideologically lined up with their program, I'm sorry, this country is not for you.
Yeah.
That's the stuff that this sort of eliminationist rhetoric, this eliminationist mindset, is something Ed Kilgore, who's runs something called the Democratic Strategist, and he advises Democratic candidates. Actually, I think he put his finger on it in an essay he wrote a few days ago about this notion of a faction of Republicans who are not interested in compromise, aren't interested in sitting down with people with whom they disagree with and trying to find common ground. They just want to mow down whatever doesn't look like them, whatever doesn't sing like them, whatever doesn't sound like them. It is a fundamentalism of the worst sort.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you go back to the Federalist Papers, Federalist 10, talked about factions. We are definitely breaking off into our own little factions and bombing each other. And, biblically speaking, a house divided cannot stand. We're at one of those moments in history, I think, Isaiah, where the people that have been elected and that we've put into office, they're the folks who are taking us straight down to, well, where.
It is really profoundly disturbing to me. I mean, as a person who is very concerned about politics, of course, I'm a progressive. But I also would like to see a politics in which, people who are in central Pennsylvania, in rural sections of central Pennsylvania, and folk who are in Philadelphia, and people who are in Pittsburgh, can somehow come together and agree on what is the common good and how we can move forward together as a country.
Yeah. And agree that we have interests and not demonize each other, because that's what's really gone on here. And to me, the sad reality is the moneyed interest wants us pitted against one another so that we can't then look at them. That's just my rationale with it.
Well, yeah, it does advantage the moneyed interest, but I tell you something, the one thing that the moneyed interest I don't think fully appreciate is that their time is going to be up real soon. If this country doesn't get its act together. Listen, in about 3 weeks or maybe 4 weeks, the country could default on its debt because the House Republicans cannot unify and cannot agree that their number one function in the House of Representatives is to govern. Do you think the moneyed interests are going to appreciate the federal government going into default and, a 1,000-point Dow crash and, interest rates that go from near zero to who knows where?
Yeah. No, good point. So the question is, what do we do? I mean, the 2016 elections not too far down the road. We've got candidates who, I just heard Hillary the other day came out and said she's not in favor of this Trans-Pacific Partnership free trade agreement, which to me means Bernie's doing something to move her in that direction. What do we do?
Well, interesting that you brought up Hillary and the TPP. We have been working for the last for really all summer on a candidate scorecard that we just released yesterday. And we posted it on the candidatescorecard.net. And we had to make a last minute change because one of the issues we were rating candidates on was trade. And that TPP statement came out literally like, the day before we were going to unveil this. And, and that actually affects Hillary's score. But the reason why we put that candidate scorecard together was to give people a tool that they can use. We did this Populism 2015 platform earlier this year with which lays out jobs, lays out trade, lays out worker rights, income inequality, and all of the key kitchen table issues that people care about. And we set some markers for people to rise up to. And Sanders has done so in a very significant way. Actually, Hillary deserves a lot of credit for rising up to some of our issues. We've actually been in dialogue with her campaign as well as Martin O'Malley's campaign on these issues. All three of the major Democratic candidates deserve credit, but also there are gaps when you look at you'll see them on our scorecard. And we need to challenge the candidates at our town halls, at their campaign events. We need to be emailing and tweeting CNN. They're having the Democratic debate on Tuesday, and they need to ask the right questions of these candidates while they have them on that stage.
So you don't think they should be asking Bernie? Now, Hillary wore a red dress. What do you think about that?
Or what do you think of her smile? Or
so that maybe actually some questions.
Do you like Bernie's suit? I mean,
you like Bernie's new haircut?
Yeah, exactly. There are real substantive questions. I mean, this country is at a serious point in its history in terms of its economy, in terms of its politics, and this is not a time for entertainment.
Because let me ask you this, in looking at Hillary's score, because I'm looking at your scorecard right now and looking at her score, could you argue that having Bernie in the race has moved her in the direction of working people and maybe, righted some of the issues, making her declare her positions? Or are these positions that she's had and maybe just didn't clarify enough?
I think absolutely Bernie's had an impact. I think on a lot of these issues, she would have preferred to be silent, or she would have been persuaded to go with the Wall Street crowd on some of these issues. I mean, look, on TPP, in fact, while she was at the State Department, she was talking about this being the gold standard for trade agreements. So is that, looking at that comment, she's done a 180. Now, maybe when she thought it was a gold standard, she did not all know then what she knows now. And it's a legitimate adjustment in her position based on new information.
So is it an adjustment, or is it just it's politically feasible and we can pull the Obama and not have to worry about it? Because look, I've been playing clips of Obama saying, you can trust me, I'm not going to pass chorus, or Panama or Colombia, and George Bush was a bad negotiator. We need agreements that are going to work for both sides. All of these quotes as a campaign: become president, become the guy, or in her case, eventually the woman. Where did all those statements go?
Well, you got a good point there. I think the thing that we need to do is just have the political mechanisms in place. I mean, we the people need to do that, to once they take a position, hold them accountable to that position.
Yep. No, that's exactly what I said. When Obama won in 2008, everybody went home. We won. Yeah. Yay. And everybody went home. So the hope is, and this is where I'm so excited about Sanders, is that he's building that grassroots momentum that hopefully no matter who is in the White House after the 2016 election, there's going to be a group of grassroots folks holding whoever accountable.
That is the genius of the Sanders candidacy, and he will say it himself. I'm about the business of building a movement. He knows that, once you get into the White House, and we've seen it dozens of times, people get into the White House, even I think sincerely believing one thing. I don't think on a lot of these things where Obama has sold us short that he intended to sell us short. I just think that what happens is that when you get into the White House, the guys in the suits, sit down next to you.
Yeah, I've said that.
And they mess with your mind a little bit. And if you don't have a countervailing force on the outside that balances that offsets that, who are you going to go with?
Yeah, you don't know what happens when they take you into that room and the CEOs from the Fortune 500 companies who are hoarding $2.1 trillion offshore in these tax havens tell you that you do what we want or we're going to crash the economy and you'll be the next Herbert Hoover. How you react? I don't know if that happens or not. I have to assume that it does.
I certainly assume that it does. And, we don't have And I think the evidence of that is just the summit that we had this week over at the White House, where you had the Workers' Voice Summit. And yeah, you can bring a bunch of workers into the room, and you can tell stories about how tough it is to work at a minimum wage job, or how tough it is to work at a place without a union. And you can tell those stories, and you can have the Secretary of Labor, acknowledge you, and the president acknowledge you and acknowledge your plight. But that's very different from having power.
Good point. And I would have to argue that by having these things, it kind of shows that you don't have the power to do what needs to be done. You're trying to gin something up.
I think that's exactly right. I was reading this. I read this account of that White House summit that's on Gawker today, and that's exactly the point. This was written by a guy who actually helped unionize Gawker, the website, and he walked in and said, "Well, this is all fine and good, but it's just at the end of the day, it says that this is not something that the White House is going to give us. This is something that we're going to have to take for ourselves."
Exactly.
And hopefully we get a White House that is with us as we do that.
And that's why I think it's so important that this next election that people get out and vote.
Not just and for president, but also we need to vote in some of these districts, including some of these gerrymandered districts. And if you're in a district where you've got a Freedom Caucus guy, come out and vote.
Yep, we got one right.
If you may not be able to take him out, but you ought to be able to scare him.
Yeah, Scott Perry, one of the guys just down the road here in Dillsburg. He's one of the Freedom Caucus guys that should easily be taken out. But again, it's a crazy area. But I'll tell you, Isaiah, it's frustrating to see what's happened to our country and what's really happened to us as a people. And it's just, well, it is what it is. But I got to take a quick break. Isaiah, I appreciate the conversation. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you again next week.
Keep up the good work.
Working on it. Thanks so much. Isaiah Poole, Campaign for America's Future, ourfuture.org, the website. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Bringing sanity and rational thought back to America. Rick Smith.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
Exposing that free trade is never free. The Rick Smith Show.
Talk about the U.S. inflation. I understand just a little. No comprende, it's a riddle. I'm on a Mexican radio.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. So it's going to be interesting. I mean, I don't know who's going to end up being the Speaker of the House, but I found it ironic, funny, comical, all of those things all wrapped up into one when I saw the Craigslist ad looking for a new Speaker of the House. That's right. His name's Mark Tecano. He is from the 41st District there in California. Put out a Craigslist ad looking for an American citizen who's experienced in hostage situations, ready for the challenge of a lifetime. Jobs for you if you have those qualifications, seeking someone who's extremely patient, motivated, ready to lead the U.S. House of Representatives. The funny part of the whole thing is he goes into explaining to the Freedom Caucus the concept of compromise and democratic governance. Yeah, good luck on that one. No one's getting the job there, Mark. I don't think you're going to get and babysitting experience, strongly preferred. Love that. Quick break, right back.
Exposing that free trade is never free. The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. With a strike at Fiat Chrysler having been averted, UAW workers will soon be voting on that second tentative agreement. UAW leaders say significant gains were made in the second round of bargaining. The union's bargaining committee voted to send the proposed contract to local UAW leaders and their Chrysler Council. The UAW Chrysler Council will meet Friday in Detroit to review and vote on the tentative agreement. If they approve, the UAW plans to make details of the new agreement public immediately. Then it still must be ratified by rank-and-file UAW workers at Fiat Chrysler. UAW President Dennis Williams says leadership heard the members and went back to the table at Fiat Chrysler to strengthen the new labor agreement. Williams says he believes this new tentative agreement addresses UAW members' principal concerns about their jobs and their futures. U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders and Representative Mark Pocan this week introduced the Workplace Democracy Act. Senator Sanders says it would greatly strengthen the rights of American workers to join unions.
This legislation will make it easier for workers to join unions and collectively bargain for higher wages and stronger benefits. Under this legislation, when a majority of workers in a bargaining unit sign valid authorization cards to join a union, they will have a union. End of discussion.
United Food and Commercial Workers President Mark Perrone says talk at the White House Worker Voice Summit won't be enough. Perrone says action must be taken. Action, he says, to stop, quote, irresponsible employers that cut wages and benefits, misclassify workers as independent contractors or hire temporary workers to avoid responsibilities as an employer and punish those who speak out and try to better their lives, end quote. American Federation of Teachers President Randy Weingarten says Hillary Clinton's opposition to the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade agreement has proven again that she is a champion for working people. The AFT endorsed Clinton for president in July. Weingarten says the TPP threatens to harm workers and the environment. While most Americans still struggle to get ahead, Weingarten says, trade agreements like the TPP only make their situation worse.
Workers Independent News is brought to you with support from union-owned, union-represented Bank of Labor. Bank of Labor has provided trust and fiduciary services to labor organizations for nearly a century. Online at bankoflabor.com.
Workers Independent News made possible in part through underwriting support from the OPEIU, the Office and Professional Employees International Union, and from the National Association of Letter Carriers. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
He's going the distance. He's going for speed. She's all alone, all alone.
So here we are, exceeding 100 days. As I said, about 2 months ago, as we started into this this budget standoff, this could be, one of those things that the new year brings us. No new budget, where we're singing is all I want for Christmas is a damn budget. Because you look at what happened on Wednesday. Again, the power of the I'm not going to raise taxes and I'm running for re-election right there front and center. Here to talk a little bit about what happened on Wednesday and where we go forward from here, I've asked John Newrohr. He's the communications director over at Keystone Progress. John, thanks for taking time for us.
Always good to be with you, Rick. Thanks for having me again.
So, any surprise on Wednesday's outcome?
I wouldn't say that there's surprise. No, I mean, I think it's important to note that there were 15 Republicans in the House who previously had shown that had publicly stated support for a shale tax, and they voted against the bill as constructed, that was a big part of the revenue component of Governor Wolf's plan. But this is not, to your original question, it's not surprising.
Right.
I think that people like Grover Norquist and others like him are, they're destroying America. I mean, it's just the truth, because we've made this notion of, raising taxes, which is the revenue side of a two-sided budget balance sheet, and it's critically important. But we've made it radioactive in a way that is so bad for our ability to self-govern, from local governments to state governments and obviously the federal government as well. And you saw now that it's not just Republicans who feel as though the tax increase is radioactive. You have Democrats who are afraid of primary challenges from more conservative Democrats or the Republican opponent being able to hammer them on doing the right thing, which is being smart about how we're raising revenue so that we can pay for the things that we need to have in Pennsylvania. So it is not surprising, but it is nevertheless still very depressing.
Here's the thing that's interesting to me, though, John, and there's the sad reality is I saw a number of the Republicans saying that they were willing to increase taxes, the personal income tax, if it was a dollar for dollar trade-off with property taxes, but they're not going to tax the drillers. And I'm going, so let me get this straight. We're going to attack low wage workers by making them pay a higher personal income tax, but we're still going to protect the drillers. What sense does that make?
Well, it doesn't make any sense. And the other problem here is the situation that we're at right now after the bill goes down on Wednesday is you have these negotiations that are apparently going to pick up again next week with just legislators. So the governor, at least for the beginning of next week, so they say, is not part of these negotiations. So you have all these people who are running for re-election, by the way, which is a huge component of this, talking about other potential revenue streams. That's got to be what the conversation is. And in reality, there aren't a whole lot of other potential revenue streams that are long-term sustainable solutions. Now, there could be that there are some it's almost like budget tricks. It's things that we've done in the past, frankly, in the past few years to try to balance the budget at least somewhat in the short term. But it doesn't fix our long-term problem. It's not sustainable. It's the kind of thing that the creditors look at and they say, well, this is why we're going to downgrade, the status of credit from Pennsylvania for the state of Pennsylvania, because you're going year on year and using budget gimmicks and tricks that aren't going to fix this problem long term. And we still have to pay for public schools. We still need to pay for these critical social services and infrastructure and all those things. So we're talking about things like liquor privatization. And the numbers show that long term, that's a bad deal for the state of Pennsylvania. But that's the kind of thing that they want to have a conversation about when it comes to the increase in revenue. So, they want to have a conversation about the pension crisis instead of really sitting down and saying, okay, look, how are we going to make this sustainable for the long term? How are we able to have a budget balance sheet that shows the money in that we need, and we're able to send the money out that the people need? And, it seems like there aren't really any adults that want to have that conversation, at least in the Republican caucus.
I'm with you, but how much of that comes back to us? I mean, the reality is we've been so pitted against one another at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder that we're only focused on each other. And to me, it's the perfect scenario where you've got the Republicans saying we're willing to raise personal income taxes on low-wage workers, and we're not going to go after the drillers or the corporate special interests. They're almost sacrosanct in this whole discussion, which I think, you go where if you need to raise revenue, you go where the revenue is. You don't go to the Little Sisters of the Poor begging for pennies.
Yeah, and the real question, though, is not, if you need to raise revenue, you go where you can raise the revenue. It's when you need to raise campaign cash, you go where the campaign cash is. So in the end, what I said before about how legislators, both Republicans and Democrats, are worried about reelection, they're worried both about what a vote on increasing taxes could look like, which is the responsible thing to do is for them to vote for the bill that was on the table on Wednesday, but they didn't do it because they're afraid of that being a campaign attack. But it's not just that. They're also afraid of not getting the check from the oil and gas companies that are operating in their districts. And so when you talk about the willingness to, throw the folks on the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder under the bus, that's because those people aren't writing big campaign checks. And it's also because we're not, doing our job to make our voice heard. There was an editorial, I believe in the Patriot News this week, that makes this point. Where are all of the people screaming and yelling with signs in Harrisburg? There have been some. And we work with some partner organizations that have done an amazing job in doing their best to pull things like that together. But it's not enough. So, that's another part of it, is that constituents are not doing what they need to do to make sure that their representatives know that they're not doing their jobs right now.
No, and this is what I've been saying for the longest time. I think what's been going on is it's what I said happened in Wisconsin. People were just so inundated with all of the stuff going on and all of this that people just tuned it out. Because most folks, they just want to lead their lives. They just want to go to work, play with their kids, cut their grass, do whatever they got to do. They don't want to hear, they don't want to know about all of this dysfunction and all of this just chaos. And I think, the wealth class of this country, they understand that and put that out there for us so that we turn away from the system. We go, they're all corrupt, they're all bad, it's all broken, and we leave it alone.
Yeah. Well, and there isn't a whole lot of, the unfortunate thing is right now we can sit here and we can say, okay, well, where is the tipping point? Let's look down the road. Let's take a look at the calendar. Where's the tipping point? And the unfortunate thing is that the only kinds of things that could be motivating factors could be the tipping point for legislators in Pennsylvania right now would be absolute catastrophes,
Yep.
right? You have
Another collapse.
a school district that literally has no money left, that they cannot do. I mean, and we're getting close. I mean, we're in situations in a number of school districts across the state where we're close. But think about the ramifications and who suffers. Kids, kids. You have school kids, K through 12 kids, who will probably end up being the collateral damage in this ridiculous budget impasse.
And, as I've always said, you go back to the old labor frames. Maybe your stomach has to be empty before your head gets right. Maybe that's what it has to come to.
Yeah, well, and the other thing that comes to mind for me, and I think this was actually in that same editorial that I was talking about in Patriot News, is, a recession is when your neighbor loses their job. A depression is when you lose your job.
Right.
And that's just another way of saying, until it really, really, really hits home for their constituents, they can continue to play these games in Harrisburg and get away with it. And, it does feel like a game of chicken, right? That nobody really wants to be the one to say, okay, uncle.
No, I'm with you. I mean, what we've seen is we've seen the Freedom Caucus, the Mad Max Caucus, the Scorched Earth Caucus, whatever you want to say, come from D.C. here to Harrisburg and to other states across the country. And at what point people who are like me are, and you political observers going, at what point do the people rise up? And I think you're right. When do they start taking to the Capitol? When are their mass protests? When are there people marching in the streets?
Well, and it's groups like the Freedom Caucus. You mentioned that's happening right now in D.C. with the mess, the absolute mess in the House of Representatives. But the problem is that what they do from an electoral standpoint, from a campaign standpoint, is they promise things that they can't deliver.
Right.
Right. And whether they know they can't deliver or not, I'm not sure. I mean, it's frightening to think that they don't understand what they're doing when they campaign. They're trying to, offer things up to their constituents that they know they can't deliver.
Yeah, I'm going to repeal Obamacare. I'm going to ship the 11 million undocumented workers out of the country. Those kind of things.
Yeah, I mean, that's happening here too. I mean, and that's another component of that Grover Norquist-esque never raise taxes pledge from legislators that is now a must do for Republicans who want to run for office up and down the ballot. But that's not what governing is.
Right.
It might be what campaigning is. It's not what governing is.
Good
and
point.
it's irresponsible. It really is.
So where do you see this going from here? I mean, Wednesday went as I think most. I got to be honest. I was surprised 73 Democrats voted for it because the reality is you are campaigning. I was kind of shocked that 73 had the courage to step up and say, no, look, our situation is what it is. We need to increase revenue. It's one of the things that I gave George H.W. Bush credit for. He saw the book, said, hey, we got to bring some revenue in, and I thought did the right thing. Where do we go from here, though? Where do you see the next week to the end of the year?
Yeah, I just don't look at those other potential options for revenue and see a path to a budget that can pass and not be vetoed. So I think that we're going to continue to see this game of chicken, most specifically on sales tax increase and on the shale tax. And in the end, there's no question that the governor's in a tough spot. And the budget that he put forward originally was a really, really good budget. It's the kind of responsible budget that you would expect from a person like Governor Wolf with a lot of great business experience. He understands sustainable budgets. But, I don't know where the person, where's the situation where somebody says uncle and what does that mean? I just don't know. I mean, that's what's so crazy about this situation. I feel like you and I have talked about this for so many weeks now, and there hasn't been a whole lot of change in the dynamics, and that's not normal. We usually, when we're talking about a political story like this, we can sit back and have a pretty good educated guess about how things play out and where the end game is. And I don't know, and that's scary.
I'm with you. I'm in the same thing because I don't know how the new leadership of the Republican House and Senate, how they react. Because we don't. These are all we know that they're usually somewhere off to the fringe, but these aren't governance people.
And in the end, back to what we said before, here's the unfortunate reality: because I think this game of chicken continues, then you really are going to start to see real ramifications in school districts. So for kids, social services are already hurting. It's just going to get worse.
And it's going to be the most vulnerable who are going to take the brunt of it first.
Yes, and that's the problem. And frankly, what's really sad is I think that there are a whole lot of legislators in Harrisburg who don't care.
Yep. No, and that's where I was going with it as well. Because the sad reality is they believe they were sent to Harrisburg to change things for the worse, obviously, and to make sure nothing gets done, because they're not people who believe in governance, and that's the part that's frustrating.
Right. Well, and in the end, it's about getting reelected. I mean, we live in that world, right? That's the political reality, right?
Yeah.
It's they're always fundraising as soon as one election's over. It's preparing the strategy and the fundraising plan for the next one.
Good point.
And that campaign plan and the fundraising plan, they don't necessarily take into consideration the most vulnerable among us that we're talking about, that rely on these social services. And those people, to them, they don't vote. Those people, to them, they don't live in their district, which, by the way, is wrong, but that's the misconception. They are not worried about those people. They're worried about the people that write them checks and get them, to the next election. And it's just so sad.
Sadly, you're correct. Last question I've got for you. What do we do, in these next several weeks? Because look, we're heading, it's not too far to Thanksgiving, too far after that till Christmas. Conceivably, we could be looking into January before anything gets done. What should people be doing?
Well, a quick plug. If you go to our website, KeystoneProgress.org, you can sign up in the top right-hand corner of that first page you get to. Sign up for our mailing list. And I mean, I know it sounds like it's a plug for our organization, but what we're trying to do is keep people informed and give them opportunities to engage. So, for example, this week, before the vote and as it was happening, we put up a page that allowed people to quickly and easily write letters and submit them directly to their representatives. And then we also had them printed and delivered them physically in person at the Capitol. So it's those kinds of things. We're trying to keep people informed, but also give them easy ways to engage. But we also need to think about the harder ways to engage. We also need to think about what we can do by going in person to our legislators' offices. I think we're going to get to that point, unfortunately, where we're really going to start to feel the effects of this game of chicken, and it's going to be more than just sending a letter. But we're going to do our best as an organization, and our partners are doing a great job to try to organize and get people the information they need to do that.
And it's what we need. We need folks mobilizing people so that we can, when we need to, exert a little pressure where needed.
Absolutely.
Sounds reasonable to me. John, I appreciate you taking time for us.
Thank you so much, Rick. As always, it's a pleasure, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
All right, fantastic. Our friend, good friend John Newrourke. He is the comms director over at Keystone Progress. You want to take a look at their website? Go to thericksmithshow.com. Just click on John's name. Take you right there. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1888. That was the day that the United Hebrew Trades was founded in New York City. The new effort was patterned after the United German Trades. The goal of the organization was to organize Yiddish-speaking workers. Individual Jewish workers had been active in the burgeoning U.S. trade union movement since the 1850s. But the United Hebrew Trades marked the first time for such a broad-based collective effort to organize Jewish workers. 3 of the early founders were Bernard Weinstein, Morris Hillquit, and Abe Kane. Weinstein was a young shirt maker turned union activist. Morris Hillquit would become one of the leaders of the American Socialist Party in the United States. Hillquit was born in Latvia and moved with his family to the Lower East Side of New York. Like many Jewish workers, Hillquit found a job in the city's garment industry. He later graduated from law school. Abe Kane was born in Belarus. He was one of the leading voices in Jewish journalism in the United States. In 1877, he founded the newspaper, the Jewish Daily Forward, which still exists today. Under the leadership of these men, the United Hebrew Trades quickly became a presence in New York City. In March of 1890, 4,000 Jewish workers commemorated the Paris Commune with a march through the city. They more than doubled that number just 2 months later on May Day. By Labor Day, 15,000 Jewish workers marched together. These public demonstrations showed the power of Jewish workers. By 1910, the United Hebrew Trades had swelled to 106 unions. 150,000 men and women were members, including thousands of Italians and other nationalities. By the 1930s, the United Hebrew Trades had reached its peak of 250,000 members. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We've been discussing the role that James Starnes played in the ceremonial Japanese surrender ending World War II. Starnes always remembered 3 problems. First, the table set up for the signing was too small for the surrender documents. Then the Canadian representative signed on the wrong lines. Finally, at the end, his Air Force flyover booked for General MacArthur was late arriving. Starnes particularly remembers his feelings on that historic day, though. He said he was elated, but that soon melted into solemn moments. He said, "I realized I'd gotten through all of it. I had a lot of friends who died, and here it was all over with." 60 years later, Starnes stated, "A lot of people had looked at me as some sort of hero, but I wasn't a hero. I was just a participant who happened to be in a particular spot at a particular time." This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happen!
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
So early this morning, another shooting on a college campus. You look at this one, not the spree kind. A kid evidently got into a fight, a little scuffle happens. 18-year-old kid decides, you know what? Going to college and, having a life beyond where prison, not something I'm interested, shot and killed somebody and wounded 3 others. And what, again, you look at this, it's just dumb. And without the gun, and, I've thought about this in my own life, without the gun, which is why I don't carry a gun, you have maybe a fist fight. You maybe take a beating or something, but nobody's going to ruin the rest of their lives. I mean, it's just nuts to me. I mean, a lot of these stories, and maybe these things have always happened, and it's just now we're hearing about it. Like this story at the Home Depot in Auburn Hills, Michigan, where this woman evidently sees these 2 guys stealing stuff. If you watch the video, it's comical almost. Watching these 2 idiots run with shopping carts out of the Home Depot to their black little Kia and then drive off where the video cameras have everything. And you go, there it is. But you've got this crackpot woman who, she's got her gun, and she pulls out the gun and starts shooting as guys are running away. And I'm going, exactly why would you interject yourself into any of that? Why would you put yourself in the middle of it? Now, I find interesting, this woman opened fire in a parking lot where I could have been standing, or any one of us, shooting at. She hit the car, I guess, and I gave a flat tire to the other one with another shot. Exactly what did she have in this? She wasn't under duress. There was nobody chasing her. She wasn't she wasn't the victim of the crime. What was she thinking? She has not been thing to me. The fact that they arrested the 2 idiots, a 52 and a 46-year-old person who are now going to probably serve a couple years in prison over a drill or some nonsense. This woman, they haven't charged. I got to be honest. There's a part of me that goes, you know what? Anytime the gun goes off and it shouldn't, or anytime that you get into one of these situations where you're not involved, we should be arresting you and at least taking the gun. Now, what I loved is the number of articles afterwards with gun experts. There's a lot of gun experts out there who are saying, well, she shouldn't have done that. It was a bad tactical move and not something I would have trained. Of course not. It's insane. And what's even more insane, the president evidently is weighing in the aftermath of the last mass shooting. He's considering the idea of going around Congress and doing an executive order to do some background checks for people who are high volume gun dealers. And, I always thought there were stringent background checks of people who sell a lot of guns. There aren't. I'm wrong. And I love the NRA's position on it. This is hysterical. Their rationale for not doing more background checks and things on high volume gun owners is, and I'm going to read this directly from the article that the NRA spokesperson Jennifer Baker said any change could ensnare people not intended to be covered, such as a widow selling off her late husband's gun collection. I mean, come on, that's laughable. The fact that that's what they pulled out of the bag. Okay, we got all these gun dealers all over the country and they're selling, however many you're going to say is a high volume. They're saying at least 50 guns a year. So if you're selling 50 guns a year, it's not the one that you had in your collection that you're just going to get rid of, even though I still think we should be looking at that. It's about, you're selling 50 guns a year. Maybe we should be looking at this, because who's to say that you're not selling all 50 of those to 50 felons who walk up to your door? Because as it was explained to me by one of my gun friends, that I can sell anybody the gun. I have it. It's mine. I go, here, money, it's yours. Take it away. No background checks, nothing. And yet the spokesperson for the NRA says, no. Well, we don't want any of that because Granny might want to sell her dead husband's guns. Yeah, it's almost as bad as Ben Carson, who basically said we can't have can't have any regulations because the Jews would have risen against Hitler had the Jews had guns. Not the fact that the Nazis were overwhelmingly powerful. No, they would have had the guns. And he went on to say, because Wolf Blitzer, kind of pushed on with that. He goes, they did have this military machine, And Carson said, I know that. And I go, I doubt that. He says, I'm telling him, this is Carson, I'm telling you that there's a reason that the dictatorial people take guns first. And I would argue they don't take guns first. They take your mind first. They poison you with nonsense. I look at what our Republican Party has done to theirs. Just a thought. Let's take a quick break. When we come back and do a little bit of the news before we head into the weekend. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
I'll never bend. I'm with you now until the end.
Thought-provoking, intelligent conversation with a heart. The voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
Let's just, get through this thing, and whatever it costs, it costs.
Senator Graham wants federal aid for South Carolina flooding, but voted against it for Hurricane Sandy.
We, the trade ministers, are pleased to announce that we have successfully concluded the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Environmental groups slam the TPP agreement. New rules to protect farm workers from pesticides. Fracking companies wasting taxpayer money. Plus,
our economies, our livelihoods, and our food all depend on our oceans.
2 new marine sanctuaries for the U.S.
All of those stories and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
You voted against that federal funding package during Hurricane Sandy.
I don't really remember that.
Really, Senator? You don't remember that?
I don't really recall that.
Are you sure?
No, we did check, and you did vote against that Hurricane
I might
Sandy relief package.
look at it and tell you why.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, my mind is still blown by Senator Lindsey Graham and the amazing hypocrisy.
Yes, in the wake of historic rainfall and catastrophic flooding in South Carolina caused by Hurricane Joaquin, South Carolina's Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, who is also running for president in 2016, took to the Senate floor to call for federal disaster relief funding.
As we get through this and look at the damages, we will ask only that is what is responsible. We're not going to ask the federal government to do anything that's beyond the responsibility of the government.
But after Hurricane Sandy, Senator Graham joined with Republicans in opposing federal disaster funding for victims of that disaster. When confronted by that fact on CNN, Graham said he didn't remember.
So rather than putting a price tag on it, let's just, get through this thing, and whatever it costs, it costs.
Your critics are already saying you want federal funding to help the people of South Carolina, but correct me if I'm wrong, you voted against that federal funding package for the folks in New Jersey during Hurricane Sandy.
I'm all for helping the people in New Jersey. I don't really remember that, me voting that
There was
way.
a big relief package. Apparently you, a lot of other Southern senators and representatives voted against.
Yeah, well, anyway, I don't really recall that.
Yeah, not ringing a bell.
Oh, well. Meanwhile, U.S. international trade negotiators say the U.S., Japan, and 10 Pacific Rim nations have reached a final agreement on the largest regional trade accord in history, the controversial Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP. Negotiated in secret, the full text still has not been released, but core provisions received mixed reviews from environmental groups. The World Wildlife Fund praised new rules to stop illegal wildlife trafficking, but other environmental groups, like the Sierra Club, urged Congress to reject the pact, saying it gives corporations the right to sue a government to overturn environmental regulations that might impact future profits.
So corporations will have the right to sue governments because environmental regulations, they will say, are hurting their bottom line.
Yes, that's right. Even if it's far into the future, they can still sue.
Sounds like a great deal for Monsanto.
The Environmental Protection Agency has issued new rules to protect farm workers from pesticides on industrial farms. The first update to pesticide standards in 20 years. It includes the first ever ban on farm workers under 18 handling pesticides.
Speaking of Monsanto,
pesticide and herbicide use in the U.S. has soared with the introduction of genetically modified crops. Out of 2 million farm workers, the EPA estimates that 10 to 20,000 farm workers are poisoned by pesticides every year.
Thanks, Monsanto.
A new report charges that the drilling industry in the U.S. is wasting taxpayer money by flaring excess natural gas. Oil and gas companies burn off natural gas out in the field because it's too expensive to collect it for sale. The new report from Friends of the Earth calculates that more than $500 million worth of natural gas is wasted this way every year and calls on the Federal Bureau of Land Management to stop that flaring on public lands, saying taxpayers are losing more than $65 million worth of lost royalties.
That's those flames that are coming out of a pipe that you sometimes see when you drive by one of these fields?
That's right. Finally, some good news. President Obama has announced he's using his executive authority to create 2 new marine sanctuaries in the U.S. In a videotaped message to an international oceans conference, Obama stressed the importance of preserving the ocean.
Our economies, our livelihoods, and our food all depend on our oceans. And yet we know that our actions are changing them. And today I can announce we are taking steps to create 2 new marine sanctuaries, one in the tidal waters of Maryland and another in Lake Michigan.
New studies report that marine life has declined in the oceans 50% since 1970. Chile has also announced it will set aside the largest protected area in the Americas, as will New Zealand.
Obama's a tyrant. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget you can download our reports anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes. Find us and follow us on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
important issues of the day. This is The Rick Smith Show.
Before you come home and tell me you're not angry, and I'll be leaving.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Got an email during the break from Brian, one of my gun friends, who says the woman in Arbor Hills, Michigan, there, Auburn Hills, Michigan, who thought it was a great idea to go shooting at the people running away with the power tools. I'm kind of stunned at his response that she should have shot. It's within her right to shoot, and she should have taken him out. And I'm going, but what? What happens if she shoots him in the back? Or worse yet, what if she shoots me standing in the parking lot? Brian, not at all in favor of people taking out their guns, shooting at people shoplifting. Bad idea. Bad idea. Even in gut nut world, I don't think the NRA would be in favor of that. Even if they well, never mind. Anyway, let's find out what's going on in Washington, D.C. and around the world. Justin Duckham, Talk Radio News Service. Justin, what's going on, man?
Well, I mean, according to NRA logic, the only way to stop a bad shoplifter is to be a good shoplifter. So you just have to shoplift from the shoplifter, right?
I hadn't thought of that. So that's why she shot out the front tire, so that she could go, steal their stuff.
Yeah. If you go back and steal their stuff, and it goes from there. That's how the NRA works.
I mean, can you believe such a thing? This woman just decides, well, you know what? I'm going to open fire in a crowded parking lot because two idiots stole a couple of power tools.
I mean, good guy with a gun, or good girl with a gun, I guess. Good woman with a gun.
What happens if you shoot? Well, never mind. Enough with what happens.
Well, no. The thing is, if you're doing it too recklessly, then if there's enough guns, there'll be somebody in the parking lot who will stop her from shooting recklessly, and then it'll be problem solved.
Oh, see, now that's the other part of that, because I keep going with that good guy scenario. How do you know they're a good guy? And you would expect someone who might pull out a gun, take her out. See, I've been waiting for that.
Yeah, I mean, that almost happened at the Tucson shooting. There was an incident where one of the people there who was armed, apparently pulled out a gun to try to shoot, but ended up almost shooting one of the victims who was already shot, which was, pretty one of those things that would have made the tragedy all that much worse that ended up going a little bit underreported. But in those situations, when everyone's armed and there's bullets flying, it's kind of hard to imagine who could be the good guy and who could be the bad guy. And that's always a terrifying scenario.
Yeah, generally when there are people shooting at each other, I'm okay with it because it's that whole thin the herd thing. My problem is I have really bad luck. And if in those situations, one of them could probably come my way, and I'm not in favor of that.
No, yeah, I mean, you're a neutral person without a gun in the middle, so that's usually the people who get hurt in these kind of situations.
Yeah,
so
I'm allergic to bleeding profusely. So I guess there's a little story going on in Washington today. Something about the speaker position being open. I saw a Craigslist ad where they're talking about anyone with babysitting experience can apply.
Yeah, that was a pretty fun ad that was posted earlier this morning. That's the ad for the Speaker of the House, which has been one of the big stories and something that has taken out all of the oxygen in the room here. Yesterday, I woke up at 6 a.m. and started talking to radio stations all the way up until about 12:30 when we heard this news. And it was one of those situations where I felt pretty good about myself, felt pretty smart, felt like I, understood all the possibilities here. And then we had a curveball tossed with us when McCarthy decided that he wasn't going to be running after all. It was a total kind of chase the rest of the day to figure out what the hell happened. We're getting a better sense now of what's probably going to happen next. We have a couple of possibilities. Boehner is going to be staying on, although he's probably itching the exit by the end of the year, if not sooner. There's a possibility of an interim speaker or caretaker speaker being put up. And then there's the third possibility of Paul Ryan finally succumbing to a lot of the pressure that he's been receiving and just taking the speakership after kind of doing this, big song and dance number about how badly he doesn't want it.
Any chance they can nominate Donald Trump? Any chance we can pull the Donald into that? I think he'd be perfect for that role.
I mean, I think the country would be, well served by Donald Trump being in that role. Speaker of the House, as John Boehner has made very clear, is a position where you can't really do much. So I think that's probably a pretty harmless spot to put him in. But beyond him, we also saw some other outsiders, or at least one rather, who was saying that he'd be willing to take it. and that was Newt Gingrich, who compared it to George Washington coming out of retirement to serve his country. And I'm pretty sure in Gingrich's mind there's not much of a difference between the two men.
You're kidding. Gingrich, well, you got to love the ego, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think Gingrich is probably going to be spending the weekend making some private calls. We do know that at one point, Louis Gohmert, the guy from Texas who's, kind of a hero on Fox News and whatnot, initially nominated Gingrich when they had the first re-election vote for John Boehner when John Boehner had his first challenge. So I would not be surprised to see, maybe sort of a draft Newt campaign.
Yeah, I got this image.
As if he needs to be drafted. But,
I've got this image in my head of you ever see the movie Back to School with Rodney Dangerfield?
Yeah.
And you got the swim coach going, Rodney, we need you. Come on. And he comes out of the stands to do the triple Lindy. That's what I'm thinking with Newt. Come on. Some kind of crazy, but only in a bad comedy movie could that ever happen.
Yeah, I mean, and what really has DC become besides a bad comedy movie? I mean, the time is right for Newt. We need Newt Gingrich back here.
That must be it.
There you go.
So do you? Because I got from the beginning, I thought Paul Ryan was the guy that would eventually get it. What are the? I guess reservation. Why is he not jumping in? Is it that he realizes the job is just impossible, or is the one person said, "Oh, he's got small children, so he wants to be there." I'm going, no, the guy's an egomaniac. He's got to want the job, right?
I mean, yeah, I think he realizes that it's a job that, not much could really be done in. And no matter who takes a position, they're going to end up being public enemy number one among sort of the more conservative factions for this whole crime of essentially trying to govern. I think he's well aware of that, and that's why he's been avoiding this. So it was really about, too much time being exerted. I'm pretty sure John Boehner could give him a call and just rest his, concerns by letting him know that, hey, he got to be speaker for about 5 years, and I don't think ever stayed after 5 o'clock. Anytime he was on Capitol Hill, he was somebody who was known for, ducking out early, and you can find him in
the nearest bar,
the Capitol Hill Club. Yeah, the Capitol Hill Club, sort of the watering hole that he would frequent pretty, not infrequently at all. So I think he obviously wants to be president someday. I think he knows that if he takes that position, that's essentially going to be the end of the road for him. He's going to be pretty well tarnished and is going to essentially have a target on his back from conservatives. Unless if he goes through his huge song and dance song about how badly he doesn't want it, if he makes it very clear that this is something that he doesn't wish to be doing and is only doing to serve his country and whatnot, he may be able to parlay that into a future presidential run. But I think it does speak volumes about the ego of the guy. That he doesn't want to avoid, or that he wants to avoid being 3 positions away from the presidency, to pursue it later. And that he actually thinks that he has that good of a chance of, attaining the spot at the White House.
But
it's a little bit bizarre.
It is bizarre, but the thing of the matter is, I wouldn't want the job because, to be honest, you're not going to get anything done. And there's part of me that goes, well, that's what the Republican Party wants, nothing to get done, because that's what they've done, nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and it's also kind of hard imagining, somebody who has the intelligence of, Paul Ryan, at least as the sort of legend goes around here of D.C., being down to essentially, follow the Freedom Caucus down the, off the cliff with refusing to raise the debt limit or, letting government funding expire in December. And I don't think he would really have much of an appetite for sort of catering to that caucus, even though he is sort of the, initial intellectual powerhouse of the Tea Party movement.
So any chance of bringing back the hammer then? Maybe since we're talking about bringing some golden oldies back?
That could be fun.
Bring the hammer back.
Yeah, no, Dennis Hastert. I don't think he's really doing much right now.
No, Tom DeLay. Tom DeLay was the hammer.
No, I know. I'm just saying. I'm just putting out other ideas. Yeah, Tom DeLay. I think he's, could probably take a break from dancing stars and make it. Dennis Hastert, when he's not in court, I'm sure would be a pretty good person to bring in. They could always have Bob Livingston come back and sort of, do a little what could have been sort of what if fantasy scenario. The possibilities are endless, and there's been a lot of big suggestions. One of the other big ones was Dick Cheney, who was floated around a little bit yesterday. He was pretty eager to insert himself in this race by endorsing McCarthy in the first place. And, I'm sure he has just sort of the skill set that's needed to be Speaker of the House. Mainly nearly a psychopathic level of disregard for feelings and whatnot.
All right, good stuff. Any chance the Joe Biden going to jump into the Democratic primary? I mean, the debate's coming up next week. If he's going to jump in, he's going to be on the stage. He's got to do it soon, right?
Yeah, well, there was a report from the New Yorker today that raised a lot of speculation. Essentially, his aides rather met with a number of DNC aides to discuss whether or not he could still make it, to discuss the sort of timeline that is remaining, what sort of deadlines they need to make if he is going to pitch a run. We do know that he's not going to be attending the debate that's going to be taking place next week. And apparently he was going to announce his decision over whether or not he was going to enter over the weekend, but that has also been pushed back. And frankly, a lot of people here in D.C. are becoming almost openly sort of hostile with the sort of coy game that Biden's playing. Everybody knows that time is running out, and the fact that we haven't really gotten a straight answer is sort of irritating a lot of political journalists. So I think at this point, there's not much of an appetite for more of a guessing game, and I don't think it's doing him any favors.
Yeah, I'm with you. If you're in, you're in. If not, move along. Get that job, whatever the next job's going to be. Spokesperson for Brill Cream or something. I don't know.
Well, maybe it's also bad. It's bad for the other candidates. He's essentially hoarding these would-be supporters for himself. And, I know that's not really going over very well. There are some people here in D.C. who've mentioned how they were, unwilling to go to other candidates' fundraisers until Biden would make his declarations known. And I'm sure that's something that's going to be happening to a lot of other candidates. He's tying up some pretty valuable support right now.
Yeah. And finally, Ben Carson on the gun issue. You got to go at some point. You should stop digging. When you say the Holocaust probably wouldn't have happened if the Jews had guns, and then double down on it. I guess that's what he did today.
Yeah, he doubled down on it, and he essentially reiterated his belief that tyranny cannot take place in the U.S. because we're well armed, and essentially said that the just reiterated the notion that the Jews could have fought off one of the great military powers of the era with their own little guns and whatnot. So a very kind of a shocking statement from him. He also doubled down in his Muslim remarks. At some point, the moderator asked him, "How come we have a country where we can have Muslims in the military, but can't have Muslims serving as president of the United States?" And his response to that was, "Well, look, we have this idea of a natural-born citizen as sort of a way to remove any doubt over the loyalty of a person." And because of that reason, because an individual could be a Muslim that has at least a seed of doubt, and therefore would essentially make them ineligible for the presidency. So doubling down on that as well. And frankly, it doesn't look like it's really doing much damage to his campaign, and that's what's really terrifying about this. This is a very sick party. The fact that he's number 2 and that he can say statements like these and not have it really damage any of his standings is really just a sick sign of how out there the likely Republican primary voter base has become.
Yeah, it's crazy stuff. But sitting in this chair, still fun to watch while we're all going down in flames and there's chaos abound. Still entertaining.
More or less, yeah.
There you go. And that's all that really matters, right? It doesn't matter if kids get education or people get homes or food or anything. Not just mildly bread and circus, man. Anyway, Justin, I appreciate the time. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, Rick. Have a good one.
All righty. Our good friend, Justin Duckham. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
Toward the end of his life, the civil rights champion and Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall was asked how he wanted to be remembered. He did the best he could with what he had, Marshall replied. That's really the most any of us can do, and those who achieve it tend to make a lasting contribution to bettering our world, no matter who they are. Luckily, there are many such people across our land, working in our neighborhoods, cities, states, and occasionally at the national level, including Reverend Everett Parker, who recently died at 102 years old. In the early 1960s, he noticed that many television and radio stations were blatantly racist. They refused to cover the African American community, ignored civil rights news, openly used on-air slurs and racist portrayals of black people, had no integrated programming, and failed to hire minorities. Others noticed this same institutional racism, of course, but Reverend Parker decided to do something. As the communications director of the United Church of Christ, he began to monitor stations and file actions with the FCC, the federal overseer of our public airwaves. In 1964, the commission conceded that Parker was correct, that discrimination was rampant, but decreed that viewers had no standing to challenge a station's license. But Parker kept pushing, and 5 years later, he and we won a court ruling that, quote, a broadcast license is a public trust subject to termination for breach of duty. Since then, he and such allies as Public Citizen organized volunteers to monitor stations, demand reforms, and train minority broadcasters. This is Jim Hightower saying, over time, by simply doing the best he could, Reverend Parker's initiative and tenacity helped alter the whole industry's guiding ethic, recognizing, in his words, that to serve the public interest, they must, quote, serve all the public.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's populist take on what the powers that be are up to. Find out more at hightowerlowdown.org.
From Panama City, this is your World in 2 Minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. Tu Youyou, a Chinese medical researcher, was awarded the Nobel Prize in Medicine this week for her 1972 discovery of artemisinin, a plant-based treatment for malaria. Joshua Blumenfeld is the managing director of the NGO Malaria No More.
We really cannot overstate the impact that this discovery in perhaps the unlikeliest of places, by the unlikeliest of scientists, in perhaps the most unlikely of contexts, has had in the world.
Artemisinin, commonly mixed with other medical therapies for maximum effect, has saved millions of lives. Malaria still kills 500,000 people every year, primarily in Africa and Asia. But the situation was once much worse. Blumenfeld points out that more U.S. service members have died from malaria than in combat. And here in Panama, during the construction of the Panama Canal in 1906, more than 80% of the canal's 26,000 workers were hospitalized in a single year from malaria. Now there are less than 100 cases here each year.
The challenge, of course, is that those interventions that we have today are not sufficient to ending the disease. Resistance is building towards artemisinin. It's also building towards the various insecticides that we have. We don't yet have a vaccine that's deployable.
The U.S. spends about $1.5 billion each year fighting malaria globally, a lingering initiative from the years of former President George W. Bush that President Obama has since expanded. Fighting malaria is a rare bipartisan success story.
Our argument is we need to double down on that, because this generation has the opportunity to end the world's deadliest, costliest disease in human history.
For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
These are words you should have told the truth. You're lying, traitor. Now we got the proof. Where you gonna run to? Where you gonna hide? You wanna put a door down? No one's getting out alive. Where you gonna run to?
Another sign of how just crazy the Republicans have gone off the deep end. You got Donald Trump saying that America would have common sense if Michael Savage, the way out extreme talk show host, were the head of the NIH. And the first thing I thought of, that's the guy I want to make sure everyone gets health care. That's the guy who, you remember the guy who said that people with PTSD and depression, that they were weak, they were narcissistic, and they were losers. Remember them? I get the losers part. That's where Trump has jumped onto this. But these are the kind of people that people like Trump would want in his cabinet. I mean, you got to think of that as well. He also You got Savage out there saying, well, you shouldn't get flu shots. No. Can't trust the government for flu shots. No. Crazy stuff. Anyway, an interesting week. Hope everyone has a great weekend. Thanks for being here on the beginning of our weekend. It's now time to go have fun. It's now time to go and enjoy your family and friends, and then get back here on Monday as we look to begin to change the world. Thanks for being here. We'll see you Monday.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's color like the tide of flood beneath the lunar sway. Imperial, mysterious, in amorous array. Democracy is coming to the USA.